the technology this evening?
So far, so good.
Excellent, excellent. 7 o'clock. Looks like we are about ready to start the meeting. And I am to wave when I'm ready to call to order to CNET. Hello, CNET. We are about to call to order. And so we'll do that now. Okay, I will call to order the Tuesday, February 15th, 2022 regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors. First up, Ms. Centrise Martin, acting manager, will introduce, let us know how we can participate in this hybrid meeting, and then we'll move to citizens input. Centrise, introduce us, and if you could have a roll call then, thank you.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, I'm just going to need 1 second. I set up the room. I'm going to go over to my computer and I will absolutely conduct that part.
Okay, that's great. That's no problem at all. Take your time. No problem at all. Just still working on this hybrid system of ours, still adapting. We're committed to it though, because it's really helpful to increase participation. So we're gonna muddle through until we meet success. Okay. Thank you, Centrise, for wearing multiple hats and literally being in multiple seats this evening. So.
Great, Madam Chair. Thank you. And thank you all for your patience as I had to work through just a little bit of an IT glitch there. Okay, so moving on. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of the board and staff, as well as the public, for joining us this evening for the February 15th regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a virtual meeting conducted using the Zoom tele meeting platform. Additionally, here in the main meeting room, we've made it available for members of the public to attend in person. If you are joining the Zoom meeting this evening as a member of the public and you wish to speak on an item, please raise your hand and share your name, municipality of residence, and if applicable, the topic you wish to speak on. Prior to commencing the meeting, I have a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion so that the minutes may accurately reflect the action taken. Finally, a roll call of the Board of Supervisors will now be taken to ensure that all members can hear and interact using the Zoom meeting platform. Please indicate that you are here when your name is called. Ms. Caldwell?
Here, welcome, Acting Manager Centrise Martin.
Thank you, thank you. Ms. Deneni?
Here, thank you.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Thank you. And Ms. Williams?
Present.
Okay, Madam Chair, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all and welcome. With that, we will move on to citizens input. This time is typically reserved for items that are not on the agenda. And so we're going to begin with that. But someone did contact me in advance of this meeting and did mention they have input for something later in the agenda, but may not be able to stay. So I let them know that we'll allow for that at this time as well. So we'll start out first, though, with items that are not on the agenda. And if you could state your name and your township of residence, and we'll start with Mr. Wes Glebe. Mr. Glebe.
I had a thought about the Bobby Rahal kerfuffle I completely agree with the zoning hearing board's decision, and I would like to suggest that the township encourage the idea of him staying on the property that he's already on and putting up a parking garage that he could house his new vehicles in and sell them from. I think it would keep them out of the sun, out of the rain, out of the snow, and it would be a very small footprint in comparison to what he thinks he needs or what he has now. For $8 million, you can build a 100-year, 320 car parking garage. It's just an idea. I think we could maybe think about going in that direction.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much, Wes, for your creativity and your contribution. Next up, Mr. Chili Allen, I believe it is. Mr. Allen.
Hi, Charlton Allen, Chili Allen, either or, Ferguson Township. Just wanted to know if there's any update on the Chapter 10 ordinance on smokers and open burns.
Thank you. I would say no, that is not something that is under revision right now. Later, we will talk about a revision of a different section of our code, but that is not, that chapter is not currently something that we are discussing.
10-4.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for items that are not on the agenda? If not, Ms. Holliday, prior to you coming on to Zoom, I did mention that you have some time constraints, and I'd be happy to allow for your contribution to our later agenda item in this time of our citizens' input. So I'd be happy to acknowledge you preemptively before you get your hand up and give the floor to you to speak on the strategic plan item. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, thank you, first of all, to all of the Board of Supervisor members. I would like to thank you all for allowing me this space. Thank you, Laura, for inviting me to be able to speak on or about the segment of the strategic plan that focuses on municipal identity. What we are doing as the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Planning Committee is we are focusing on different areas within Pine Grove Mills that will help people to have a great understanding of what this community is about, what makes up this community. It's like a little, I liken it unto a little bitty diamond in the rough, if you will. Because there are so many different little nuggets and treasures that are really special about the Pine Grove Mills community. The thing is, me being a native from New Orleans, from a big city like New Orleans, I just feel like I'm on an adventure on this committee because you learn something new every day about, you know, different historical things about it, and the people and the creative events and traditions that makes up this community, and what we are doing in an effort to help bring about this municipal identity in order to add some color to it. And to help other people to see how the light in the life of this community just beams and radiates in Center County. We are inviting the public, those who have resided in Pine Grove Mills, as well as anyone who's a transplant to this community and who've been in this community long enough to be a staple in the community, or even if you know of some sort of historical dynamic or some historical story that can be told. We are asking for contributions from you. We want to hear from you. And so we have set up the Pine Grove Mills page, and I believe Liz Grove spearheaded that, setting up the Pine Grove Mills page, Facebook page, and making it available for people to upload their stories to talk about wonderful little intricacies like swifts and sweets and all sorts of things that help to make up this community. And we're going to compile those stories. And I'm not going to tell you the rest because it's a surprise. But do know we are expecting to hear from you. We want to know what you know. We want to know about those special moments. We want to know about any businesses that was once in Pine Grove Mills, that was a staple in Pine Grove Mills. We want to know about if anybody has any information about that baseball team that I'm still trying to find the name of. I saw a picture, so I'm getting close. Feel free to share that information. If your grandparents once resided there, they have an old Hope chest with some pictures and stuff in it. Hey, bring it. We want it. And we thank you also for contributing to this wonderful project. I'm sorry, Laura, did you want to?
No, I'm sorry. You just get me so excited. It's like we are just talking about our strategic plan and you're already literally doing an action step and recruiting others to participate. And I really just love it. And I really appreciate you making time to come and to share that with us. And then later we're going to have more conversation about that strategic plan. And I think we have some other Pine Grove Millions here to talk about that, and Pine Sapiens. So I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for your creativity and your time and your invaluable service on multiple Ferguson Township ABCs. So,
well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. And I consider it such a gift to be able to serve in this capacity. And I'm very humbled by the opportunity. And I look forward to hearing you guys' stories.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
You're
Okay.
welcome. And with that being said, I'm going to bid you guys a fine farewell and jump off here and jump back into another meeting I was on before I jumped on this one. So
Bless
anyway,
you. Thank you.
And I hope the rest of your night is the best of your night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love that incredible injection of positivity. With that, let's move on to the approval of the minutes. And I will accept a motion. I'm sorry, any changes or corrections? Okay, with that, I'll accept a motion to approve the January 18th, 2022 Board of Supervisors regular meeting minutes.
This is Patty. I move that we approve the January 18th, 2022 Board of Supervisor regular meeting minutes.
Thank you. Second.
This is Tiara, second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. Passes unanimously. And with that, we'll move on to our authorities, boards, and commissions reports. We are now receiving those in written form. Tonight, we do have our SCLO Regional Library representative, Ms. Barbara Ziff, here with us. Thank you so much, Ms. Ziff, for joining us. Is there anything in particular that you would care to highlight in your report for us? Which, thank you, it was very well done, and I appreciate what you drew our attention to. Anything you care to highlight? Thank you.
Just that Ferguson Township residents use the library a lot. They're the highest users of any of the townships, and I think that's really important to remember, as I know our dollars are hard to spend and, you know, difficult to come by. So resident checkouts were 29.17% of all COG circulations, which is quite a bit.
Thank you very much. That is an important piece of information. And as I mentioned earlier, and you saw Shannon discussing, we are working on that strategic plan. So a plug in for a mention or a nod in our plan for the library and being a great participant there. Thank you so much. Barbara, any questions for Barbara? Okay, seeing none, we shall move on to our Center Region Park and Recreation Authority. Authority report. Mr. Bill Keogh, oh, I see Mr. Bill Keogh is here with us. Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things in addition to the written report that you should have in your packet. We have our regular authority meeting coming up this Thursday. It is at our normal time, and it is a hybrid meeting at 12:15 on Thursday. In addition to that, we will be having a special meeting on February 24th. This would be the authority at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The sole purpose for that special meeting is to approve and move forward 3 of the contracts for bids related to the Whitehall Road Park. If you remember, we, in our actions previously with regard to Whitehall Road and contract bidding, approved all of the ones except for 3, and we are now prepared to accept those and need to do that by formal action. And the reason it'll take a special meeting is because they've been prepared, but we're not ready when we advertise the current meeting for this Thursday. So next week on the 24th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we will have a special meeting for the sole purpose of approving those contracts and moving them forward. One last comment, with the governance committee that has been formed, and this is a regional governance committee, and some of you have the history on that, but I serve on that governance committee along with your chair, and we had our organizational meeting, and Rich Frank, who serves from College Township as a supervisor, is the chair of that, and Kathy Madison, who is the chair of the authority, was selected as the vice chair for the governance committee. So we are prepared now with leadership to move forward in the task of sorting through governance as it relates to the whole park and recreation system in the region. Unless you have any questions about the report that I've turned in, that's my report to you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, totally, really local government nerding out on that governance committee, a governance committee in the government. It's great. Thank you. Patty.
Thank you. It was more of a comment, Bill, and it has to do with your report and the project manager. And I remember it coming through facilities. I basically recall that we voted just to support hiring of a project manager, but in the final sentence of your report, you said that this person will only report to the authority. So Laura, maybe this is one of those governance issues where things are like not entirely clear, and we can get some clarity on that. But I don't recall that we weren't going to involve the COG facilities director. I mean, the fact that it's only going under the park authority is odd to me. And anyway, that's just one of those things that I thought was odd, because I don't recall voting on that.
It's a great observation, and I appreciate Bill including that in his report, because you then can make that observation where actually that entire process included Lou Brungard of like deciding we're going to have a project manager, and it's going through the facilities committee, and it's really integrated in COG, but then technically those documents say it's a function of the authority. So then operationally it gets kind of like pigeonholed into there, even though there's still all this crossover, but not formally. And so, yes, exactly. That's exactly the kind of thing will be addressing in that committee. So that's very insightful.
And Patty and Laura both, when I reread my written report to you this afternoon, that particular phrase jumped out at me. And I said to myself, what did I mean when I said that? And the biggest thing that I meant in saying that, and I probably should have said it better than I did in the report, was to differentiate between that project manager being accountable to any of the contractors. That the contract, this position was a position that was accountable to the development side of things, to the park and recreation and the COG and all of that side of things. It was not a project manager that was accountable to any of the contractors in terms of the work that was to be done. And I didn't say that as well as I should have. And I'm trying to get used to this written report business. And like I said, when I read it this afternoon, just to prepare for tonight's meeting, that sentence jumped right out at me. And I said, what did I mean there? And I didn't quite mean exactly what I said. So hopefully I've clarified that a little bit for you.
Yeah, Bill, I appreciate your, my report is filled with typos that I just tried to get the report written and submitted and went back and reread it. And so like you, I'm getting used to this process. Thank you for the clarification.
Same. Thank you. And thank you, Bill, so much. Okay, with no other questions, we'll move on to special reports. We've got 10 minutes allocated for both the reports tonight. So we'll try to stay in that time frame, but I don't know if we will. Centrise, you're up first with the COVID-19 local response report. Centrise.
Thank you. So there has been no operational changes here at the township since the last update was provided by David Polka, Township Manager. All meeting restrictions and staff assignments do remain as they were reported on February 15th. We currently have all staff back reporting for duty. We do not have any staff that are currently out for COVID or suspicion of COVID-19 exposure. At this time, there are no significant impacts to operations, but should that change, we will communicate the specifics through our traditional and social media. In Center County, there are 34,302 confirmed COVID-19 cases in total, a little over 400 deaths. We have about 85,601 reported negative cases on the Pennsylvania COVID-19 dashboard. Across the Commonwealth, the number of confirmed positive cases reached 2,264,761 with 42,424 deaths. Second, on vaccination, Center County data shows approximately 94,000 residents have been fully vaccinated, up somewhat from the 93,000 reported previously, and another 14,000 have been partially covered. The county's vaccination rate is about 59.9% having been fully vaccinated, and 68.4% having received at least one dose. Mount Nittany Medical Center has about 24 COVID positive inpatients in their care, ranging in age from 49 to 100. 13 of the 24 patients hospitalized with COVID-19 at Mount Nittany are unvaccinated, and no patients were on ventilators as of this morning when I checked the report. The Omicron and Delta variants remain the two primary variants of concern currently in the United States. All Ferguson Township residents are strongly encouraged to sign up to receive the COVID-19 vaccination if they have not done so already. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions from the board or the public. Thank you all for your patience and understanding as we continue to recover from this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you so much, Centrise. Any questions? Okay, with seeing none, let's go ahead and move on to our Pine Grove Mills Streetlight Improvement Project update. And this will be introduced and led by Dave Modricker. And I believe Ms. Jennifer Harrington of Barton Associates will also participate. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Chairman. Tonight, we are going to talk about one very specific part of the Pine Grove Mills Streetlight Improvement Project. As you may remember, last year, the board did allocate funding to replace 25 ornamental streetlight tops. There was a concern about the Kelvin, the temperature, the color of those lights. We've since done some research, and tonight I'm going to allow Jennifer Harrington, a lighting engineer with Barton Associates, to provide you some information. She will also let us know if there's something called a light box that may be available for the board to come and view at the township building to visualize and see some of these colors. And then hopefully at our next meeting, I'll be asking the board to take some action and move to either include these lights or not. So at that, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Harrington and let her give you a little information.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Dave. Good evening, everybody. So we're going to try to make something that can be thought of as complicated as simple as we possibly can, because I know that's a hard thing to do. I'm director of lighting design of Barton. I've been working professionally for about 20 years in lighting design, and I still think sometimes it's a hard thing to talk about at times. So we're going to try to put some of those questions, I think, that have been arising amongst you at ease, hopefully. So the existing light fixtures that are out at Pine Grove Mills, they're a high pressure sodium lamp. So when you go out there, they're extremely warm. That's been the very defining characteristic of high pressure sodium has been that it is almost an orangish warm color. And one of the other defining characteristics is that it has what we call a very low color rendering index. So you'll hear this term CRI. And what that means is that it doesn't render colors very well. So you have that beautiful portrait behind you, Laura, that has that really deep reds and the grays and if you took that out and held that up underneath that lamppost, it would not look very good. It would muddy up a lot of those colors. It just doesn't provide a good light for really anything, but it was very efficient, and that's why it was used, from the years ago. It's a very efficient source, gives a lot of light for less energy, but we have now come into the era of LED, and that's why we're talking to you about moving in that direction. LED has a much higher, so we're talking CRI of high pressure sodium is around 20. It's a scale of 100. 0 is terrible, 100 is perfect. High pressure sodium, which is out there, is 20, so very low. We would be looking at LED, which is moving you up into that 75 range, which is not something I'd probably tell you to use indoors, but for outdoors, that's actually very good. So people will be able to see cars, pedestrians and things. You'll actually have better visual acuity under a light that has better color rendering index. So that's something you would be improving, moving from high pressure sodium to LED. The biggest question then comes back to the actual color of the light that you'll see. So high pressure sodium and color temperature in general is measured in what we call correlated color temperature. So a very warm color temperature, high pressure sodium is around 2200 Kelvin. LED doesn't necessarily go down to that low of color temperature outside. Most exterior manufacturers started at around 4000 Kelvin. That's been around for quite a long time now in exterior lighting. That's what you have throughout the rest of Ferguson Township. It's 4000 Kelvin color temperature in a lot of your street lights. And that's a very bright white color. So you will notice that in many of your communities. Obviously, knowing that in Pine Grove Mills, you're starting at a very warm 2200 Kelvin, going from 4000 down to that is quite a shock, I guess. And that I think is what you're worried about for a lot of your residents, and that's understandable. Color temperature and exterior lighting has continued to improve in the sense of it keeps coming down to a lower color temperature, moving down towards 3000 Kelvin. And now we're actually able to achieve 2700 Kelvin. And that's only happened, honestly, within the last year, year and a half. So LED, because it's continually evolving, literally every month, it keeps getting better, either in energy savings or other attributes. So we're now looking at a 2700 Kelvin color temperature, which right now is the absolute warmest you can get in an exterior light. But it is about a 500 Kelvin difference still. So it's gonna look not as orange, but still warm, okay? So to help you figure that out, I actually have a sample case that is, it's actually for an interior fixture, but it will show you the different color temperatures. So I'm gonna show it to you on screen. Cameras play with colors and things. So my plan is I'll show you what it kind of can do, and then I will drop it off with Dave so that if you guys want to come in and actually take a look at it in person to see the range of color temperatures and what that difference is, you're more than welcome to do that. So give me 1 second. Hopefully technology works for us and we'll see the difference in colors. The sample case actually has also some interior, just different reds, blues, greens. You can kind of see how the different colors play with the colors of the light play with the interior colors as well. So it'll kind of give you a feeling of what that difference in range is between 4000 K that you have in the rest of your township and then what you would have here in Pine Grove Mills. Okay, so bear with me 1 second and we'll shut some lights off here.
Thank you, Jennifer. While you do that, I noticed Tiara's hand was up. Did you have a question you wanted to squeeze in, Tiara?
You know, I do, but I don't know if this might answer my question. So
okay.
Okay.
Yep, very good.
Answer my question.
Okay, you can hold. Hillary, did you have a question?
Again, I think I'm going to wait to see. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good.
Sure.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
so we're going to start here and I'm going to shut all the other lights off so it doesn't play in, okay? And like I said, I apologize. My regular laptop died on me today, which is obviously horrible timing. So I'm using a little bit older laptop to do this. So again, bear with me. It will look much better in person when you get to come in and see it and touch it and feel it. But what you're looking at here, which seems like a pretty bright color, is your bright white 4000 K. That's what you have throughout the rest of your township in the decorative post top lamps at the moment. Okay, so that's your township standard. If I draw, go ahead. Does anybody have questions? Sure.
Dave Modricker, did you have a question there?
Only that we may move toward 2700 if that's what the board likes.
Is Jennifer going to show us a different one?
Yes, I
okay.
am. So I'm then going to show you, I believe we had put in originally we had tried to do a retrofit lamp in your existing fixtures that are out in Pine Grove Mills, but to retrofit the lamp just itself in the existing fixtures, we're only able to achieve a 3000 Kelvin color temperature in that particular lamp that's used in those fixtures. And I know this isn't showing very well, and I apologize. Like I said, cameras don't like differences in colors very much. And this is an older camera too. But the idea is it got quite a bit warmer, jumping to a 3000 Kelvin. But we installed that out there near the naked egg, and I think that was still felt to be too white, correct? So we also then have, and this is a controller in the box that you'll be able to turn it on. I'll show Dave how it works. And then it's actually labeled with the color temperature buttons. So you just hit a button and it'll jump down. So then we went to 2700, which warms it up just a touch more. And I don't know, let me see if this might help work a little bit better. I don't know if.
Oh, yeah, man.
I I appreciate your effort a lot. I think you're right, though. It's hard. I mean, there's
It is.
you know, a lot of distortion probably, but the
It is.
idea
Yeah.
is fantastic. And the fact that we can
Yeah.
go and experience this is wonderful. I had heard Dave Modricker was brewing something with some kind of light inside the building. So this is
Yes.
this is good.
So,
So
it-
before I go back to Tiara and Hillary, I want to hit Matt because your hand went up since then. Matt, do you have a question before we go back to Jennifer to finish? Her
Sure.
presentation, if she has anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the light box idea. Just two very quick questions. We have two lights here in Pine Grove Mills, the one by the Naked Egg, and there's another one that also has a corn cob fixture installed. Is that one also 3000 K?
that's a great question. Dave, do you know?
It is not. I think they are two different Kelvin, but I think 3000 is the lowest.
Okay. All right. So I mean, maybe I could ask for a little clarification on that one, and we can email back and forth just to understand that, so we can direct folks to look at what they are if they are different. The other question that I have is, sometimes you see things that you don't like. And I don't know what happened to the sheets on South Atherton, but it's kind of the lime green sheets right now. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that at night. So I've talked to some residents and that have noticed that as well. And we've said, yeah, that's not what we want. So I don't know what is going on there, but it's definitely some folks here are saying, I don't know what's going on there, but that's probably not someplace that we want to look. So maybe the township has more information about that, but I'm not sure.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks. Good questions. Let's address those then after the wrap up. So Jennifer, then just bouncing back to you to finish up your presentation. We'll bounce back to Dave and then wrap up with questions.
Sure. So basically, one of the things that we've seen in the lighting industry as a recent trend is that moving to that warmer color temperature, that 2700 K color temperature, that's what the Dark Sky Association is really promoting now. They are obviously very interested in making sure that we're still able to see our starry skies at night. And also they're worried about animal migration, what these higher color temperatures are potentially doing to animals, insects, humans even. I think we're learning a lot about what this CCT correlated color temperature, which tells you if it's a warm light or a cool light, what that's actually doing for us as human beings. And we know that the warmer light that is closer to fire, closer to candlelight, closer to that incandescent lamp that we all kind of grew up in our own homes, it's better for you in the evening. And the reason being is it keeps your melatonin in your body flowing and helping you sleep, helping bird migration so they don't think they're flying into 4000 Kelvin sun when it's really a light, a street light, things like that. So we're learning a lot. It's constantly evolving, especially with the evolution of LEDs. So I think, if you're looking at a color temperature and you're worried about making sure that it's good for the environment, as well as keeping that more historic feel to Pine Grove Mills, I agree that going with something of that lower color temperature is what you're going to want to see. I do not believe we're going to see lower than the 2700 Kelvin because it's been a standard in the lighting industry for a very long time, and it's a standard with an LED. So I hope that answers your questions with regard to where you're at and where we're looking at you potentially going.
Really does. Thank you so much. Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add before I open back to
Yeah,
it
just
back
in
up to questions?
just in wrap up, we investigated ideas about dimming, motion sensors, timers on a bigger system that might be feasible. But in this location with this many lights and the constraints we have, I think we're probably either looking at, do we want to move to the 2700 Kelvin LED? If we like it, do we want to make that our standard and not 4000 for future lights? We can talk about that, and staff will take that direction. And then hopefully you have a chance to come in and look at the light. And, you know, at the next meeting, we can talk to you and see if you can make a decision on whether to go forward or leave it high pressure sodium.
Thank you, Dave, so much. Every single conversation I'm thinking about strategic plan action step, 2700 Kelvin as a basis for our lighting. So, okay, with that, Tiara, you took your hand back down. Did you still have a question before I go to Hillary?
Slightly. I'm not sure if you can answer this, Jennifer. Some people have light sensitivity and wear certain types of shades at night just because of all of the lights. Will this voltage make people think that the street light is a car light from a distance, or will there still be a distinction between the street light and a car in the distance?
In a car.
Yeah.
I think that you're not going to see any difference in what you have right now. One of the things that is really wonderful about the actual existing light that you have is that we're able to get that exact same light. It'll look exactly the same. You won't even notice outside of the color temperature that it's a different fixture. You know, our hope is that you will notice a little bit of more warm yellow rather than warm orange in color temperature, but the actual fixture will look the same. It'll be at the same height. If you're not having, nobody's having that distinction now between, is that a street light or is that a car headlight? You're not going to have that then either. We're not, you know, I think a lot of times that car headlights are now going in that xenon high, bright white color. We're not going to be there at all. We are going to be still in that very warm color temperature at the same height as what you have right now. I really don't think anybody's going to see any difference in that. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense.
Also, one thing that we didn't mention is that the amount of light that you're getting out of the fixtures that you have right now, we are able to basically within a tiny bit match pretty much the exact same amount of light that you're getting from the fixtures. They might look a touch brighter only because you're moving up in color temperature by 500, right? It's a perception thing, but if I go out and measure the light now and measure the light later, we'll have the same amount of light on our meter. It's just, it has a little bit of a perception of a touch brighter.
Intriguing. Lighting is intriguing. Really is. Hillary.
Okay. Thank you so much for all of this information, Jennifer. My question is based in like my very limited knowledge of like indoor lighting grids and lighting grids that have incorporated LED lights. I know that there's been research and discussion about dimming or motion sensor, that type of stuff. I'm not sure if there are any sort of like and I'm sure you know, like, are there any sort of like gels or different potential like lenses that could potentially shade the intensity of the light and like that inherent shade of the light to skew warmer?
Sure. So there's two things you kind of touched on there. The first, I applaud you for knowing gels and knowing that that they have been used in light, definitely in theatrical especially, but sometimes we use them in commercial environments. But no, we usually, so gels in general are usually about good for a certain very limited number of hours. I think, Dave, you and I talked about gels at one point. You said, can we just put a gel on top of a corncob lamp and call it a day? And I said, I would love to tell you yes. And we went down that road, and it's true of the theater. It's true of anytime you use a gel, it has a certain or gel life hours, which isn't long. So you'd be out there replacing gels constantly because they start to get brittle with the fact that you're passing light through them. Plus you have sunlight happening on top of everything else. which is just that UV is going to cause those to disintegrate very quickly, and it would just be a constant maintenance nightmare. The second thing I was thinking about though was, oh gosh, now I lost my point. I apologize.
Was it about films? I think also Hillary mentioned something called films. I'm
No,
out of my depth
no,
here.
just like the particular kind of like lens or I guess like cap that could be on that lamp to dispel the light.
Great question. Great question. That's exactly what it was. So the other really interesting thing that goes along with this LED version of your same fixture that you have is that we're actually able to get it in different what we call light distributions. So your fixture out there right now throws light literally 360 degrees around the fixture. No matter which side you go to, you're getting the same amount of light out of it. With LED, we're able to pick a more specific light distribution. So we'll be able to throw less light behind the fixtures that maybe the light would be falling on somebody's proper, front yard, and direct the light more towards the sidewalks, which is really where you're hoping to get the most amount of bang for your buck, right? So that's one of the benefits of LED too, that we've not had before, is really being able to pinpoint where that light is really falling and make sure that we're using the right distribution for the right application. You're not going to get that out of what you have right now. And it is a sort of an upgrade. Even though it looks the same fixture, you're going to have an upgrade to it besides just the energy savings from LED.
Thank you so much. Again, intriguing stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So it's not really a discussion item. It was an informational item. It was great information. We have some steps that we can take. We can visit the apparatus, the light box, I think it's called, at the township building. We can promote to especially Pine Grove Mills folks that they should maybe come and take a look-see at that. How long will that be there?
I think we were able to hold on to it at least for 2, maybe 3 weeks, if that works.
Great, great. And then Dave will put like a discussion on an agenda whenever you are ready for that.
Yeah, if the board's ready, we'll put it as an action item for the next meeting. If that's too soon, we'll make it the meeting after that.
Okay, all right. So we'll follow up with that, but that's the general plan. Might be too soon. We'll see how that goes. What about the information on the Pine Grove Mills bulbs that are actually installed? There's 2 pretty white ones in there. Could we get just the information on which is which, just so people can see them in situation out there as well? I know one is like 4. We're not trying to get them, but as just a level setting.
Yeah, I'll have to check. It's probably been a year or 2 now since we put them out there. I believe one may have been 3,000, the other might be 3,500 or 4, but I'm not certain. But I know neither of them are 2,700. So really looking at them doesn't really give you a gauge of what we're proposing because they're both brighter.
They are pretty bright. Okay. Okay. So that sounds great. The information was fantastic. Really appreciate that breakdown. So
thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Any final questions? All right, everybody go visit the light box. Thank you. Ready to move on to COG and regional committee reports. It's my preference that we really breeze through these in a way that's like a synopsis of me saying, does anyone want to highlight anything in the 7 COG and regional committee reports that are attached to our agenda? Okay, then we're going to move on to the, thank you all for providing them, typos and all, I'll speak for myself on that one. We'll move on to the staff reports. Do any staff members want to highlight anything in any of their reports? And then do any board members have any questions for any staff?
Madam Chair, the only thing I'd like to share with the Board of Supervisors is that Communications Nick Biling started in the Office of Administration as our communications coordinator last week. So I'm sure you will hear from him soon, and he is available should you need to make a request. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to ask him to send out an email. What is it? Not an email. An announcement about the light box for everybody to visit. Dave Modricker, do you have anything you wanted to add to your report? Thank you, Centuries. You're muted, Dave.
Tagging on what Centrice mentioned, our new arborist, Larry McGinnis, started on the same day. So he's been here for this will be week number 2. And at some point, I'm sure you'll have a chance to meet him.
It's wonderful news. I'm so happy to hear it about both of those positions. Really happy to hear it. Thank you so much. All right, let's go ahead and move on to unfinished business, to our discussion on the update to the Ferguson Township Strategic Plan. This will be introduced by Peter Milan. I'll also have a few words to say of introduction, and if Centrice wanted to add anything, and then we'll go ahead and move into public comment first on this, and then go to board discussion. We're going to conduct this in kind of a brainstorming sort of way. So we're just really interested in getting lots of ideas. So first we'll go to Peter, maybe Laura and Centrice, the public, and then some board discussion. In our board discussion, first, we're just going to hit just general items for the narrative, but our main focus of a discussion will be on actions, talking about the actions section. So with that, Peter, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Yeah, so this is pretty much another update that we wanted to present to the board this evening. You know, we discussed some action items that were kind of important to pretty much gear us towards a more a final product. So I kind of wanted to shift the conversation over to you, given that, I mean, this is more of a board discussion and I'm just here to take notes and kind of facilitate if that's okay with you.
That sounds great, Peter. And I'll just add that, you know, in your agenda packet and the agenda on the website, there are some past strategic plans of the township. And then there is also a current draft of the strategic plan that we've been working on. And as Peter pointed out, tonight is really for discussion. As I mentioned, I'm going to try to break that into 2 components. But first, I am going to go to public comment. I also wanted to note I received, just going to quickly run through this so I don't forget. I received a fair amount of public comment leading right up to right before the meeting. And I did not forward it to everybody and that kind of thing. What my intention is, what I think that I'd like to present to the board is that we include this public comment actually in the strategic plan, maybe in the appendix. We're obviously going to use it for our deliberations and discussion as well, but I've seen other plans do this kind of thing. I don't think we've talked about this, but like I received, I'm looking at least 6 Word documents that I can count in front of me, and there's probably more in my email. So I've received public comment from, I won't use names, you know, they can decide if they want to mention their names at some point, but probably from about 7, 8 people. And so I will forward them, and then I would request that we include them in some manner. One of the individuals, I believe, asked if a board member could read her public comment. You know, we can consider doing that later, but again, it will be included. I think it should be included in our document, at least. So with that, Centrice, did you want to add anything to the intro and the focus of this conversation before we move into public comment?
I would just like to thank Peter for joining us this evening and listening to the board's, you know, interest in expanding on the goals and providing some additional information with the interest to better create some actionable items to correspond with the goals as they're written in the document. I also want to encourage the board to consider that, you know, in the last meeting, Peter did outline and reference the contractual terms within the agreement. Peter and Stephen have both been pretty accommodating and scheduling additional meetings. Peter and I talked a little bit about the additional meetings remaining. So after this meeting, he is available. And Peter, please chime in if I'm mistaken how we talked about what's remaining left in terms of scope of work. He is available to attend an in-person public meeting, as well as one more additional virtual meeting. And of course, would like to facilitate, you know, to conclude the strategic plan update. I think it's noted in the agreement by March 22nd. So as the board's deliberating and preparing for a plan forward, there should be some consideration about those terms. He's here this evening, so of course he can speak to whatever might be asked. But I would encourage the board to make that decision, and so we can provide Peter with a pretty clear path forward. Thank you.
That is great. Thank you, Centrise. I then will add on to what you just mentioned. It reminded me of a few things I had thought a little bit about, you know, trying to help everybody map out the expectations for the continued engagement with Peter until that March date. And so what I had been thinking is that this would reappear on our March 1st agenda and include any comment, you know, as attachments, and that we could discuss it at that time. It would be great if Mr. Milan could come to that virtually. I hadn't really thought about the placement of that public engagement in person, so we can talk about that a little bit. But then I also my expectation or thought was that after each meeting, after this meeting and after the March 1st meeting, there would be an incorporation of any additional items, and then we would receive a draft. So I was thinking that both for March 1st and March 15th, we would have it on the agenda with the draft as amended by previous discussions and any input that we wanted to add. We can talk a little bit after public comment where they can provide some input on it. We can talk a little bit about that in-person session. And so thank you for pointing that out. Did I get that right, Centrise and Peter? In-person session meeting? I'm sorry.
It was an option. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Centrise. Go ahead. You're good.
I was just going to say that it was an option. I mean, the board can certainly decide to take that in-person meeting and have it a virtual or a hybrid, but I just wanted to provide to the board that he was willing and available to do one more in-person meeting and then one more additional virtual meeting after this evening.
Fantastic. Okay, before we go to public comment, Hillary, did you have a question or a thought about that?
Yeah, and this is me just feeling like a dummy. Can we clarify, are we looking at 2 or 3 meetings, and which of those are like more board and Peter? Which of those are public hearing? And what is our projected timeline for those, other than knowing that March 1st is the intended date to have finalized discussion?
Okay, yes, let's review that. So my thought, and this is sort of open for discussion down the discussion way in this particular meeting, right? But my vision or my thought, how I've been thinking about that timeline is, so this is our second meeting in February. So in terms of scheduled meetings, there would be 2 scheduled meeting opportunities to have discussion during a regular board meeting. And so that would be, in the way I think of that, that would be a period for public comment on the draft and then a period for board discussion on the draft. I don't think there is an actual public hearing on this. Maybe there is a public hearing to adopt the rest. No, okay. So there won't be an official quote public hearing. That would be part of an ordinance process or something, but there would be opportunities for public input at both the March 1st and the March 15th meeting if it were on our agenda. And then the other thing that we didn't really talk about, or I didn't even conceptualize at all, is this idea of and I would think Peter would be at our next meeting, that March 1st. That would be his virtual appearance, because he's still working on the draft at that point and incorporating. Then there's this option that we didn't talk about at all, which is an in-person or possibly hybrid, as Centrisa's pointed out, other opportunity. That it wouldn't be a regular meeting, I don't think. Maybe it would be our April work session, but that's after March. So no, it wouldn't be our April work session. Haven't talked about that, but we can after we'll take public comment. I don't know if that cleared anything up or made it a little more fuzzy. But March 1st and March 15th, regular meeting. Something else, maybe we'll talk about it here in a little bit.
Sure.
And then Peter's time is wrapped up. At that point, at that March meeting, we'll have the choice. Do we want to adopt it right as is, or did we want to send it to the ABCs or anything like that, which we haven't done yet. But I don't want to get into that before, the end of Peter's engagement, because that's just far too much of a workload to even envision. So go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I think for me, in terms of like how we can best marry efficiency with transparency, figuring out actual actionable next steps, like for each of these meetings is going to be really important, so that so all of us, like whether it's the board, whether it's public comment, whether it's staff, like we know what to expect coming down the pipeline in terms of what's going to be discussed and how that's going to impact each of these drafts. And so I think my recommendation would just be for us to my fear is that we are going to deliberate about a bunch of points that may or may not make it into the draft, instead of focusing on what this draft as a big picture kind of looks like in terms of what are our actionable next steps for each of these policy points that we want to address, how and when are we going to address them, and then how are we going to make sure that we wrap this up with everybody's voice in consideration. So that's just what I would like to bring to the table.
May I ask for a point of clarification?
Sure, Peter.
My apologies. I didn't, the woman who was there from Pine Grove Mills in a meeting, my apologies for not getting her name. Is there an informal consensus from the board that there's some additional research needed to bring Pine Grove Mills into the municipal identity section of the plan?
Yeah, I think that between what like Hillary is saying and your question and our discussion here, we should be able to kind of get us to the next step, which is yes, for sure. I think if I were to, which I don't want to step into my discussion yet, I want to make sure public comment. But if I were to say something, which I will, it's there are a lot more. If we're going to brainstorm, so I'm going to refer back to the Pine Grove Mills small area planning process and what a really good process it was. And I think we maybe missed some parts of that process, and it kind of looked like this, right? Up here, lots of stuff went in, and then down here, something came out, and down here was a priorities dashboard, I'll call it. Up here was all of the items. And I think that, I don't know that all of the items are in the funnel yet to get down to here. So I think, providing opportunity for people's voices to be heard next here with public comment, receiving the public comment that we've had. I was sort of waiting for the results of the meeting, the open house meeting and the Pine Grove Hall meeting to be incorporated into the draft in our goals. But they didn't come until this draft. So I think that I now will comment later that there need to be more of them reflected in there. And so I have a list, and I'm sure we all have a list of things that we want to see in there. And I think we can get to the point of having all our voices represented, but we're not just quite there yet. So soon I want to move on from the discussion of the process, which we can come back to, I think, after it's more informed in our discussion. But Hillary, before we do, go ahead. You're muted.
Silly Zoom. Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of the process is everything. It's, to be completely frank, it is really frustrating coming on as a new board member who was not present at the December meeting before I was sworn in, to then be expected to be able to make decisions on this strategic plan for the next 5 years without being able to glean the knowledge from not just my ward, but the wards within the township as the whole. And so I think coming up with a really deliberate process for whether it's the next 2 to 4 weeks or whether it has to extend, just so we make sure that we are, adequately listening to the folks within this township, as well as constructing what this best strategic plan is going to look like. I think that's really important. And so I don't want to throw the process aside just to deliberate.
Nobody's throwing any process aside. That's part of what we're going to be discussing, but the public also came to be able to contribute, as the narrative said, to talk about additional action steps. And so I think that we also want to honor that a lot of folks are here to really kind of focus on action steps that they want to also see included under those goals that are in the draft that was included with the agenda. So I want to make sure that we go to them next and hear their input. At that time, we don't have to have any board comments. We can go right back to the process if we would like, but I want to make sure to give them the floor next. So with that, if anyone from the public, I know some of you folks have contributed written statements, but you are here and present. I want to give you an opportunity to reflect any of those statements. First hand up. Oh, we've got a physical hand and an electronic hand. I'm not sure whose was up first. Wes, we're going to go with you. It takes you more energy to hold your hand up. You're first, Wes.
Thank you very much. I hope I have enough energy left. I wanted to go back and do a little brainstorming about the things that might have come under the boards and commissions and authorities. We had recently, and also in the township strategic plan report, been apprised of the circumstances with the EMT situation. So that's come up into the public spectrum a lot more recently. And then I wanted to, I'm sure people recall a few months back when Craig, a gentleman that lives on Nittany Mountain, got shot in the head by a neighbor. And he was forced to go to Tyrone Hospital because the Nittany Hospital was, I don't know, for various reasons, lacking of staff, closed wings, and so on. Well, both he and his wife are in their 80s, and I'm sure that not only getting shot, but also having to drive down to Tyrone to see her husband was a hardship that I found, given the fact that I'm close to their age, was rather scary to not have a fully functioning hospital here in town. I think it's taken for granted, perhaps, but it certainly is an expectation that would seem just. So what I'm proposing is that we start thinking about, we have a CATA report, library report, other COG reports, and I know that the hospital does report in some fashion to COG, but I would like it to be broken down a little bit more, and I think Ferguson would do well to ask to have an in-person hospital report and get into the weeds. I want to know about the health of the hospital. I went online. I know it's a 501(c), but I don't know how it fares in terms of staff, personnel, what the pay rate is, and whether it's comparable to other places. And along with that report, I think the township would be well to ask to have the health clinics, remote services, all of that. You've got Geisinger, you've got Nittany Health, and you've got Penn State Hershey. I don't think we should be in the dark about what kind of state they're in. And along with that, I would like to see maybe a GSI map that clearly locates all these different health services, so anybody can go to it. I know I've been said, oh, you go see Dr. So-and-so, and well, you don't even really get a clear where he is. You're supposed to figure it out yourself. And I don't feel that that's adequate. Maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know, but these things make me grumpy. So that's my add-on to the written stuff that we sent in. I'm been very focused lately, and certainly it was Craig getting shot in the head and realizing that there was no way he could go to our local hospital that I found very upsetting. I'd like some accountability.
Thanks, Wes. What do you think of the idea of including, so I've seen in other plans, and this is going to that process. What do you think of including your written contribution, like in an appendix? Frequently they'll use an appendix. Are you interested in that? Your words actually being represented? I mean, right? One hopes that it's going to be integrated as well, but I've also seen appendices that include actual public comments. Would you like your contributions that you took the time to put together?
Oh,
would
if
you like
somebody,
them,
if
would
somebody
you
wants
like
to transcribe it and put it in, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go to other public comment. Dorothy, you were next.
Well, thanks for recognizing me. And I want to say that I'm very happy you have a section on environmental stewardship in your strategic plan. And when I was thinking about my comments, I thought, I think that most people think about energy as environmental stewardship, but of course, you have other people working on that and have had, so I am really just want to focus on the land that we have and who is holding it and how that land can become more environmentally responsive to what is going on in our times. So I've divided that up into farmland, parkland, and homeowners. So I think that using for agriculture, I mean, people are always between a rock and a hard place in agriculture, and I realize that, but I think there's an awful lot of room for people to move forward, especially if they're provided with education, and we make that education possible. When I think of agricultural education and stewardship, I think of Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture. I think of Penn State Cooperative Extension and programs that could be sponsored by the township itself. But also we have people in the community, such as Robert Anderson, who is on the Organic Standards Board in Washington, D.C., and is very willing to work with farmers. So there's just a lot of resources that we need to access and also make available in ways that are non-threatening. You know, something in my head has always been an issue is that Hanover Foods has a spray schedule that they make farmers abide by, which whether they need it or not, right? And then that food goes to Hanover, and the farmers are, if they choose to grow for Hanover, they must use that schedule. And so one thing that Penn State has always needed is a pack and chill facility for their kitchens, because they can't use agricultural products that aren't already packed. And the only packing place in this county is Hanover. But we could work on, through Penn State's needs and farmers' ability to provide, we could work on sustainable vegetable production at a pack and chill facility locally, so that there could be actual benefit to farmers that produce for some organization as big as Penn State. So I think we have to think about all the things we can do. I mean, farmers are stuck unless they have opportunity and they have education. The other part of my presentation was about, or my notes was about parks and how creating walkways with pollinators on both sides of both trees and bushes and flowers and grasses, and a walkway that wasn't just straight and going through grass, but rather curvy and interesting to kids. And creating that could be an actual process that residents become involved in and learn how to do it, and then can duplicate it on their own grounds, and do it with their kids or do it with their neighbors, be with their neighbors. So it becomes a way of integrating neighborliness and planting and what have you. But we don't really have to spend a lot of money on that, because Clearwater Conservancy provides trees via the 10 million tree project and Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So there's lots of ways to do this on the cheap. We don't have to have trees that are already 15 feet tall. I planted river birch in my backyard and from Clearwater, and within a year it was 8 feet tall. So it depends on the species, of course, but there's lots of things you can do on the cheap, actually.
Dorothy, thank you so much for your contribution. I would say that a lot of times the barriers we run into, which one of the volunteers at Snetzinger highlighted for me when they were giving some of their input to me before the meeting, is just having the person power to be able to maintain those areas. So I would love if you include that in your information that you forward to the township, or in that written information, or I can work with you not during the meeting to put that into words, to get that into some of our action items for like parkland. That would be fantastic. And I really appreciate your time. So I'll just then also remind everybody to we have definitely a lot to get through, to try to stay, to try to be really efficient in your presentation of your ideas. And I'm also very happy to work with anybody after this meeting to get something and help you get something in writing. If you want to then email it as far as input. I don't want to have anyone feel like they're not being heard. So, okay, thank you, Dorothy. And with that, let's go to Matt and then Dave. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate that. And just want to say, Matt Heller, I'm looking forward to working with the Board of Supervisors here as part of the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan, or the Pine Sapper, as we like to call it affectionately here. So I just want to touch on a couple different things. And I know the strategic plan cannot encompass everything in 32 pages, right? It has to be written at a certain level. But I do want to encourage board members to please take a look at the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan, because we have over 60 action items in about 5 different areas, such as land use regulatory, economic development, multimodal transportation, etc., that ourselves with the community members have contributed to over the time. So again, I just want to put a plug out there that is available, and our meetings, of course, are always open and they're advertised on the township calendar. Now, myself specifically, I'm representing here this evening the economic development side of the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan. And with that, I just was hoping to encourage that we take into account ways that we can build businesses within Pine Grove Mills. So when we think about these things, I did send an email earlier to the Board of Supervisors, just want to consider options like tax incentives for business recruitment and retention, as well as developing, a small business association for for-profits and nonprofits. And then finally, promoting business network, events and things to bring the community and the businesses together. So with that, I know it's those three things are represented within the strategic plan. Again, not specifically, but things that align to the strategic plan. Just wanted to present them here for discussion, and that's about it. So being efficient, I think I'll just go ahead and stop right now, and happy to answer any questions about PineSap outside of this meeting. And my information, of course, is available on the township website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for your time getting that information together ahead of time, emailing it. I couldn't keep track of all the input and who it was going to, but we're going to organize that as we move forward. Would you be good with that being included if we did this sort of an appendix? Okay, fantastic. That's great. Okay, good news. Okay, and then Dave Stone, your hand was up next. We'll move on to you, Dave, and then Bill.
Yeah, hi. I'm Dave Stone. I live in the borough, but I'm representing Nittany Valley Environmental tonight. I'm going to try, I sent something in writing, and I probably would do best to try to read it because at least So I went through the final section, and I wanted to say under the executive summary, chapter 2, I think when you're talking about the organization of the borough or of the township, I really think you should refer to the Ferguson Charter Bill of Environmental Rights. And I know it's a bit of a complex thing, but I think it's important to put that in there as a basis. It gives, in our view, it gives Ferguson, as well as the borough, who has a similar charter change, extra authority and flexibility, and it's something that's been a factor in different actual litigation and other things. And it's not cut and dried. But just having it in there as part of the organization of the township is so fundamental, and it does correspond with the public input, which ranked the environmental issues very high. And so to go on to specifics, again, I'm just going to summarize here. I think with financial stability, the dependence of the Ferguson tax base on Penn State employees and students is obvious. And we think the best way to enhance Ferguson Township's financial stability is to improve the overall local quality of life, which is critical to Penn State's ability to compete for student and research talent. I think we can't ignore the fact that economic development has to be enhancing Penn State's situation and in a changing world. And similarly with the economic aspect, and I also alluded to the specific opportunity for local farmers, but I pegged it closer to the Mustard Valley Lands Initiative, which has a agricultural component. And I'd really hope that would be the springboard to reach out to adjacent farmers and to really make the whole thing a showpiece, to really lock in that project. And as part of this, and I feel a little bit jealous of the Pine Grove group because they've been very effective in creating a sense of place. Here at this end of the township, I think we really have to deal with a sense of place that runs all the way from Mustard Gap through Whitehall Regional Park, through the yards at Toll Brothers, all the way up Blue Course to the new developments at Pine Hall and Circleville, right into West Campus, the Terrace Streetscape, and even the west end of the borough, as sort of a corridor, a very high profile future corridor, which should be greened up, it should be efficient, it should have aesthetic qualities. And as much as we can do to create a sense of identity there, it's not easy. But I noticed recently how strongly people felt about the trees that were planted 50 years ago on Atherton Street. Well, similarly, I think that Blue Course corridor has to become a sense of boulevard of a futuristic Ferguson. I think that goes to a lot of these things. I won't go into the specifically at Circleville and Pine Hall as a result of our settlement, which you were all involved in. I think there's going to be opportunities to further enhance the environment there in the later phases, including the eco village and so forth. I am proud to be associated with the inclusionary housing that's going to be there. I think there's going to be an opportunity to enhance that with environmental qualities that'll serve the residents well. And with obviously public participation, transparency, early involvement, and again, careful procedural recognition of the Charter Bill of Rights. I think putting that at the top of the table, on the table, is good for public involvement. Let people know right off the bat that the environment's important. Sometimes we found in the past that economic considerations were often, and commercial considerations were put at the top of the table, whereas I think the charter actually requires the environment to be there early, and that prevents litigation, it prevents controversy, and it gives people time to work out some of these enhancements. So thank you for the time.
Thanks, Dave. And same question to you. I didn't see your written stuff that you sent. Can you resend it to me? And are you okay with it going into an appendix of public comment?
Yeah, I hope there's no typos. It was a last minute. I sent it to Centrise, and I told her I didn't need to have it sent out to the board tonight. But yeah, that'd be great.
Yep. Thanks. And Bill, thanks for your patience. You're up.
Thank you. With regard to the strategic plan, its need to address the existing agricultural business model and our existing stewardship efforts in the agricultural area, I think is critical. 2/3 of our land mass in Ferguson Township is devoted to farmland and/or what would be described as a rural environment. And we need a mechanism for getting together with the appropriate process that you have going on to have a farm community strategic plan input into what's going on. As farmers, we're all independent businessmen and women, and independent farm families. And I'm speaking to try and get somebody to come up with how can we get the voices of the ag community in our township together and have input into the strategic plan as it impacts 2/3 of your land mass. That's all I have.
Thank you, Bill, very much. Any other public comment before going to Hillary? Hillary, you're up.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for your public comment. It is so insightful and really informative, and I'm very grateful for it. Bill and David, at some point, I would love to pick your brain, because I think there are a lot of conversations about how we can tie together the environment and agriculture and the economy. So it's not an either or situation, but kind of a holistic approach as to how we can address all of these issues and make sure that everyone's voice is being heard and that everyone is being set up for success. I don't believe I have any of your contact information. Mine should be on the website. I encourage you to reach out. I serve on the Climate Action Sustainability Committee on the COG, and I would love to hear more about like what issues specifically impact you in Ferguson Township, because I think there's a lot of mining that we can do here insofar as how we can make this work for everybody in terms of the environment and agriculture and the economy. Kind of working backwards. Thank you also, Matt, for speaking to Pine Grove Mills. I'm going to be really interested to have more conversations about municipal identity, because I think there are a lot of municipal identities and I'm not sure if there's just one. So I'm going to be really interested to see how we can tie together all of the different lived experiences and diversity of backgrounds that we have across this incredibly diverse township. And then to speak to Wes and Christine, in terms of what's happening at Mount Nittany and a lot of other hospitals across the region and certainly across the Commonwealth. I think the most pressing thing that I can impart is that there is a Patient Safety Act bill that is trying to be passed through both the House and Senate. It is bipartisan. It is supported by both houses, and yet it is being met with resistance from leadership. It was proposed by SEIU Healthcare and the Nurses Alliance Union. And from the folks that I've spoken to, like the nurses that are in this union, a lot of the issues that we are facing in these hospitals, particularly in rural areas, is that they are being overworked, they are understaffed, and they are being charged with taking care of too many patients. That is not healthy for the patients, that is not healthy for the nurses on staff, and it's not good for an organization. So the biggest thing that I can press is to contact Representative Kathy Rapp. She is the chair of she's the chair of the health committee at the state house level, and I would be more than happy to share her phone number with you. Thanks. That's all I have to say.
Okay, so then let's just hit the draft a little bit in discussion with the board. I thought we could, as the narrative indicates, hit the action items, any feedback we want to give to Peter. But first, before we go into those action items, which the narrative indicates we'll be talking about tonight, I just wanted to give a few minutes for overall comments on the draft to Peter. For example, I have one, and my one comment is, do we have, and I just missed it, some of the survey statistics, like number of respondents, like a synopsis of that anywhere? And I just missed it. And so that's my only question, comment about the general non-action specific parts of the draft.
The answer is no, because the survey is still open.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can work with Centrise to finalize a date where we can shut it down, and I can provide those analytics for you if you like.
Thank you. That answers my question, and it's helpful when we wrap it up with the discussion of how we're going to move forward. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a summary in the plan. Just we don't have the exact statistics yet.
Gotcha. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so now again, just board members, general comments like that, generally the plan. Lisa.
So very generally, well, I did have that question too, because I had asked last time that be included. So that makes sense if it's not closed yet. So yeah, if that can be included. Since we're focusing on action items tonight, I was planning to have dialogue in my comments on the narratives and the text prior to the goals and action items for, I guess, that March 1st meeting. I thought we'd maybe dig into narrative there. So I don't have any comments now on that because that's not what we're doing tonight, but I will have comments on that. And then for the goals and action items, I think what I'll do, I have comments on arranging those. So it's not quite big picture, but it's also not action items, but I'll just hold it until we get there. And I think that'll explain itself once we're talking about it.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Any other, just at this point in time, general comments on the draft? It could be about the pictures. It could be about the narrative, as Lisa indicated. It could be about the survey write-up. Any of that at all? Okay. Then I'll wrap it up by generally speaking, Peter, in terms of the draft. I like the narrative in a general way. And I appreciate the survey write-up. Again, we'll put a pin in the question of closing the survey when we talk about process after we wrap up the next part of the discussion. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and move on to goals. We have 9 goals, I believe it is. We had 8, and then we added one. And then at our previous meeting, we had some discussion on whether it should be a separate goal or be integrated. But we are going to then now focus our discussion on the goals and the action steps. It could be something specific you want to talk about. It could be something general, maybe like the organizational structure of it that you want to talk about. That's up to you. But that's where we're going to focus that part, this part of the discussion on that part of the document. Thank you. Tiara, I see your hand is up. You'd like to open, please.
Yes, I emailed, but I didn't know how to present my comments on DE&I. So I wrote up some things that I had already been thinking about prior to getting your email, Laura. So I have those written up. I don't know if I need to send them to the whole board now when they should be discussed, but I do just want to put it out there that I do have suggestions to make it an additional item line and to not have it in the mix of anything else, to make it very clear and concise on what those goals should be, and to have them in the plan. So that way within the future, in the next couple of years, they're actually in the plan and they can be addressed. So I just want to say that.
Fantastic feedback, really clear. So as I heard that, so I think that that's something that we can easily move forward with addressing. What I heard was, Peter, that the idea on the table is to, yes, have that separate DEI goal, like we talked about, with the sub actions or objectives and actions underneath it. So in the future, they're called out there. Obviously, more things can be added and whatnot, but there's a good start with that. Tiara, would that be a somewhat fair synopsis of that, that part of what your intended maybe changes for the document?
Yeah, and I would say more additions, but yes.
Okay, yes. And then for that other part of the question that you started with of not sure then how to incorporate that, all that information. That's the part of the process that I'm a little fuzzy on yet. I'm not sure. We all know that we want to, but we're trying to manage that efficiently. At this point, I'm thinking maybe we want to email all of that to Peter and have him integrate it into the draft. I think that might be the easiest way to do it. And then what that gives us is next time a nice full draft to actually have a dialogue about. So that's what I'm thinking of now, but certainly not a decision. Others that want to comment on that goals section, either generally or specifically, and then we're going to wrap it up and finish up with our process talk and move on. Lisa.
Should have just raised my real hand because it takes me too long to put it back down then. Okay, so I guess that clears up what I'll talk about now then. So we won't go over specific suggestions for those actions. So like if Tiara has a list under that DEI, the new DEI goal, she'll email that into Peter, that'll get incorporated. So when I'm looking at my list of things, I don't need to go point by point right now. I will take this and I will email this to Peter, and then March 1st and March 15th will be dissecting all of that and doing whatever we need to do with that. Okay, so then what I'll talk about right now is when I was coming up with action steps and thinking about, previous plans and, different things that we've been talking about in these meetings, it was helpful to me to look at the goals in a different way. Just as I started writing things down, to me, they naturally fell into different categories or headings than they had been in the previous plan. So, just when I would look at finance and economic development, to me, they're both under financial resiliency. So I had that and then finance and economic development underneath there, because I don't know if there are enough action steps that we carry forward to fill out 2 entirely separate goals for those things. Maybe there are, but if not, I wouldn't think it would be bad to have those under one heading. But when I forward this document to Peter, you can see that and the items that I included underneath there is potential action steps. And I had, for instance, and probably some others of us may have done this too, I had a DEI item under economic development. So that I think Peter would take that and then incorporate that back under the new goal of diversity, equity, inclusion. And then maybe there can be some cross-referencing that happens there. So we're seeing how these different things are integrating with one another. So there's that. I hadn't really thought that through, but now I kind of like that idea because I see where a lot of these things could overlap. When I looked at planning or municipal identity and growth management, the action items I was seeing fell a little bit better into a category or a goal of planning for a livable community. So that would be, that municipal identity thing, we really struggled with that. And, I think that was kind of outlined, and for Hillary too, this is what was kind of contextualized for us at that Pine Hall meeting was a goal in that previous plan that was kind of geared toward these different zoning districts that are now a little bit different than they were back then. So we were looking at the Pine Hall development as maybe having a little town center, and that could be where we, kind of put our focus on. And now that's not really a thing. That's not really how that's going. And so we're kind of embracing this diversity of different identities. So I just thought that was kind of awkward at this point. So I just kind of re-thought about that just for myself as I was looking at these things, and growth management, I felt fell under that. So when we were looking at the growth management goal in the draft, it's really talking a lot about zoning and upzoning, or where can we expand, and we have already identified a lot of that when we just redid our zoning ordinance. We did so much of that. Maybe one potential action item under there that I could include here would be the TSD, and that I update, that'd be a really concrete one. But maintaining that regional growth boundary and that sewer service area is the growth management plan that we have subscribed to. And our zoning ordinances are what supports that. So I thought it was, maybe not so necessary to have that whole item on that, and maybe have growth management, maintaining the RGB and the SSA underneath that different heading. And so underneath there too, I put housing opportunities and affordability. And so that would be our new workforce housing program, just for example, I won't go into everything, but I had integrating universal accessibility into building codes and zoning. And so that's something we've talked about. Now there would be another point of cross-reference back to regional items. So it's not just us, not something we would just do, but there's a carryover there. So, and underneath that livable community item, I had safe bike and pedestrian pathways, which I didn't see getting a whole lot of focus, but did at the different meetings, and I know are important. So that's kind of how I imagine that thing. So that was municipal identity and growth management that I combined into that. The increasing participatory government, I have some different action steps that I will send over to Peter, and I kind of looked at maybe if we could reword that heading a little bit to community engagement and transparency, because I think that's what I've been hearing a lot of, using a different advisory bodies for different things, maybe even for neighborhoods like the borough has for their neighborhood representatives, implementing those small area plans like Matt was talking about. And even what Dorothy was talking about, doing the trees along the pathways through the neighborhoods and making them interesting and, adding to that. But so that kind of thing. So I had that underneath there. And then what I had for the environmental stewardship is really similar to what Dorothy was saying too. I kind of divided it up into the different categories. So I had parks, the natural resources conservation, and then sustainable farming and farmland preservation. So kind of looking at those things and then having those action items underneath there, but broadening that out so that we're not, to Bill's point, ignoring this huge segment of our community and, realizing that it ties in here. But there's so much crossover back to, like Bill and Hillary said, to economic development. There's so much we can tie in there when we're adding some text and some context to these things. And then the last couple of things, well, I guess really the last one would be that regional, I forget what it was called, regional relationships.
Partnerships. And
yeah. So the public safety item in our draft, I think it's difficult to have that item like that because of the way our systems are run. So, I don't know where to divide them all up, but because we have things like fire under regional and our EMS, we have our emergency services coordinator and our public safety committee at the regional level. I think those are good and important and strong systems. And so I think it is healthy to maybe have some big component or that regional partnerships that focuses on, maybe pulling out the health and emergency or health part of that, so then we're looking at what Wes said, getting those hospital reports. We don't have a liaison to the hospital, but through public safety, we have, like I said, the EMS coordinator, we have those different things. So, taking those very valid points that Wes brought up about us knowing what's going on and tying them back into that regional component, and then transit for that regional thing that, getting Catago here to Ferguson Township, I think should have its own special line in there.
Put that in there, Lisa. So make that in your, written stuff, because
so
that'll
go in there
to get those things in there. And I think I'll interject right now. I think it's important for all of us to think about these things. The strategic plan is the starting place and the budget is where the rubber hits the road. We can put it in the strategic plan all we want until it's in the budget or it's an actual program. It's not happening. So I think that we can be a bit aspirational here. We don't have to worry about, oh no, I might not want to support that, or I might want to, it's like, let's all contribute and get in as much as we can. It's when the rubber hits the road down the road that we really have to duke it out about some of these things. So back to you, Lisa. Sorry. It's just.
No, that was really it. I just say that, to kind of reimagine some of those goals, I looked to at the CIP. And so to see, where we're planning to spend a lot of money over the next 5 years, and how that's in response to our current strategic plan and just how things have evolved. And so I think that was helpful to me in just, I guess, maybe putting, some updated wording to some of those goals and just kind of, I don't know, I felt like I was able to see the flow a little bit better when I looked at it like that. So that's really all I had. And like I said, I'll clean this up and then I can send this to the board and to Peter.
Great. So then just, so for Lisa, you've got some clear action items there you're going to submit. And then you also have some potential renaming and reorganizing that you're going to submit to Peter. And we'll submit it to Peter. We'll copy the board, but no deliberation, just copy each other so we know what's going on. No deliberation because we're sunshine. And then we're going to attach these things at the next meeting agenda so everybody else can see exactly what was sent. So it's all very transparent and whatnot. And then Peter will work to integrate these things. And then we'll deliberate specifically on the integration of these things to get us to the next step. All right, with that, let's finish up the board conversation. We've got a couple folks to hit. Hillary, let's start with you, since your hand's up.
Will we see those draft iterations as board input is suggested, or will it just be general board input and then kind of be rearranged as is?
Yeah, I think the approach we should take now with our timeline is we're going to give this to Peter. He'll do the integration just as is, integrate it as best he can. And then we'll provide feedback as to whether that reflects the board's thoughts at the next meeting. Basically, we've got 2 more draft opportunities before we say goodbye to Peter and thank him.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, what would be more efficient for him?
I mean, just from my perspective, I think the amount of work that's coming to me based on this discussion, I'm going to be very honest, to come back by March 1st with these additional revisions and a separate item for Pine Grove Mills, it's going to be difficult for me to come back on March 1st with a revision, with a new draft. Just the amount of work I'm hearing from the supervisors and the additional comments that members of the public are submitting that I haven't received yet. It's going to take some time to kind of collect, analyze, and integrate it into the plan. This is the first time I'm hearing that there are other documents that the public has submitted, but I haven't seen them now.
It's not documents, it's just public comment. Public always emails their board supervisors. They're always giving us input on things. So it's not like a document or whatever. It's just their input that they put in written forms to facilitate the process.
Well, I guess I mean, I got an email. I just got an email regarding some additions to the plan.
Was the email from public? So we'll get into the process. I would like to then just finish up on any comments about the content of this plan, and then let's finish up with this process question that's been introduced. So Lisa, if it's about process, can you hold it just so we can get through any additional comments? It might be very brief.
Yes.
Tiara, you talked. Lisa, you did. Patty, do you have anything of substance that you'd like to share right now on goals or actions? Okay, thank you. Hillary, anything on what is in the current draft of goals? Okay, we're right to process. Fantastic. All right. So Lisa, you had your hand up about that. Let's go to you next. Please. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify with Peter that there's not a separate goal for Pine Grove Mills.
Well, it's not a goal. It's regarding municipal identity.
Yeah.
That's a separate discussion.
Okay.
It's not really a separate discussion. It's just adding things into the current draft. It's just an addition. You know, if I were to email and say, you know, I think it's important that we add as a potential action item to purchase the street lamp decor for Pine Grove Mills. That's not really a big deal, right? It's just put it in there and then it's one whole draft. It's, you know,
I mean, I guess to not simplify the task. I mean, there are other outcomes derived from this discussion now. I mean, there are other. I mean, I'm trying to document as much as I can, and I mean, until I see what's being presented to me, I mean, to make a March 1st deadline, it's going to be kind of tight.
Okay. Okay. So let's not abandon all this, and let's say let's extend that deadline to March 15th. Same process whereby, you know, we send in suggestions. You know, I some of the things that the public mentioned, as Hillary said, they're very good thoughts. They're not thoughts that I had. I would like to see them work themselves into the draft. So, you know, I want to be able to contribute that in a way that's easily integrated. I think others do too. So we'll go ahead and email. Tiara will email her points. If Hillary and Patty have things, they can email Lisa and myself will. Those things can be integrated. I think that the restructuring that Lisa brought up, you can hold off on that, because that, I think if we just fill in the blanks of what's already existing, and then at our next conversation, we'll revisit what Lisa has brought to the table once those action steps are filled out a little bit and we can see that blueprint a little better. then Lisa can lead us in that discussion of, do we want to, collapse any categories or rearrange things a little bit. As she mentioned, though, even if we change the names a little bit, it's important nuance in terms of what it conveys to the public, but the action items underneath are probably still going to be about the same. So I think the main structural change that you're going to be incorporating, Peter, and the only structural change is what Tiara has mentioned about that separate DEI goal. So for right now, that's the only structural addition. And then adding in any action items that we email, and that's it for the revision of the draft. The other item we talked about is just an appendix collection of public input, which I can do for you by just copying, pasting all of the emails that we got into that appendix. Usually it's anonymous, so I'd be glad to make it anonymous after the board reviews it. I can do that internally and just as a confirmation, not as a deliberation. So I can do that to make sure that's captured. So if I do that appendix and there's just that one structural change of the goal addition, and then there's some integration of action steps that we write, and you don't have to reword them at this point at all. We don't need any rewording. Just put our words right in that document. Bring it back to us then at March 15th. We'll read basically our own words, right, in an integrated way. And then that will be the final draft in our time with you. So is that clear? Just, I'll do the appendix that we talked about for review. You'll integrate that one goal, and then any other action items that come your way, just fill them right in under the goals. We as board members can take responsibility to identify where we think it fits. And then in our next discussion, if we change our minds, that's on us. That's, we can do that part.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, great. Hillary.
Thanks. Yeah. Just point of order. I'd like to do a time check. We had 60 minutes allotted for this discussion. I would love to see if we can just succinctly wrap up, our next, just because there's been so much discussion. I would love to see what's our timeline for this? What are the dates that we are working towards? What are the things that, the public is going to be working towards, as well as the Board of Supervisors, as well as staff, and how can we lay this out most clearly? Just because I'm still a little unsure of this. Thanks.
Madam Chair, would you mind if I
Sure, go for it. Thank you. Yeah.
I'd like to suggest that perhaps if the board is comfortable, that I can work directly with Peter. I can get the drafts that have been provided by the Board of Supervisors, the individual members, get that over to Peter. I can also include it in the March, all of the items that I received by David Stone, for example, and any other additional public comment that might come in by email. I can compile and include in the manager's report for the March 1st meeting, and then of course also attach as an attachment in the agenda packet for the March 15th meeting. And between now and the March 15th meeting, work closely with Peter to help get all of the items that have been shared by the board members, as well as any suggestions that department heads might have to propose corresponding actionable items. So I'm happy to do that. If the board is good with me working directly with Peter to get this presented for March 15th, I'm happy to do that. And then of course, I'll provide an update at the March 1st alongside with any documents that are compiled and provided to Peter. We good?
That sounds wonderful in terms of the work on the draft. That sounds great. I just wanted to review then that what that means is there wouldn't be any discussion of the draft, this draft or the next draft or any draft at the March 1st meeting. So we have one less opportunity to have any conversation. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that and is okay with that.
Well, the March 1st discussion could be held on the 15th. We can just push everything back 2 weeks then.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
not, I'm not opposed to that. It's just, I mean, as I sat here, as we're all talking, I got 3 emails. So there's a lot to consume. So I think we'll just push, if it's okay with the board, you know, and based on Centrace's recommendation, we'll just push everything back 2 weeks for now, if that's okay.
Yep. And everybody is clear when Peter says we're going to push everything back 2 weeks,
Yes.
as opposed to the March 1st. Is everybody just feeling clear on what that means before we move on? Okay. Okay. All right, great. So everybody get their stuff into Peter and CC the board, right? Email Peter, CC the board and Centrise on anything that you want added into those action steps.
Wonderful.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And my computer that had my agenda up went to sleep. So Lisa, could you please move us to the next item? And thank you, Peter, so much for your attendance. Oh, okay. And Lisa, please go ahead and move us to the next item.
Absolutely. Up next, we have a public hearing on a resolution of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors approving an amendment to the Ferguson Township Agricultural Security Area by adding an additional 50.73 acres included in tax parcel number 24-008-008-0000 and tax parcel 24-008-008A0000 owned by David Burkett.
That was a good one to misreading. Thanks. Centrise, you're up with our intro. Thank you.
Thank you. So provided in the agenda, there is a narrative that really defines and describes the process that's been implemented to get this to the finish line and back to you as part of the public hearing. I'll just kind of go through some of the highlights and remind the board that on January 18th, the board was informed and acknowledged Mr. Burkett's application that proposed an addition of 50.73 acres included in the 2 tax parcels named in the narrative to the Ferguson Township Agricultural Security Area. In accordance with the Agricultural Area Security Area Law, Act 43, the Board of Supervisors referred Mr. Burkett's application to the Ferguson Township Planning Commission, as well as the Center County Planning and Community Development Office. I'll take a minute to note that traditional practices here at Ferguson Township, we have traditionally sent ASA applications over to Planning Commission for review and a report. We have traditionally in the past had an advisory committee that would form, and last time they did, we have noted on file in 2013, and also provide a recommendation. That advisory committee was not convened, but instead this did go to the Center County Planning and Community Development Office. The township received favorable reports by both the Planning Commission as well as the Center County Planning and Community Development Offices. They're both recommending that the Board of Supervisors consider adding in the additional acreage, 50.73 acres, and to be included in the ASA. There's a motion provided in the agenda. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Thanks, Centrise. And this is a public hearing. So first up is opening it up to public comment. Would anyone in the public care to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain the motion you find in your agenda.
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Okay, Hillary has moved, and is there a second?
I'll second. This is Patty.
Thank you. Any discussion on the item? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote. Centrise, if you would.
Yes, Madam Chair. This is resolution 2022-04. Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Ms. Deneni?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously, and we are on to authorization of a public hearing on an ordinance of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 16 Parks and Recreation Part 1, Section 106 and 107 Chapter 22, Subdivision and Land Development, and Chapter 27, Zoning by Amending Sections as described in Exhibit A, introduced by Director of Planning and Zoning, Ms. Jenna Wargo. Jenna, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Danini. So in November 2019, the township completed a comprehensive update. Since then, staff's been tracking errors and omissions with these new ordinances, and we are recommending amendments to address those issues. So the board has seen this many times in the past year, as well as the most recent work session that was held on February 8th, 2022. Provided in the agenda is the draft amendments for each of those chapters. As discussed from that work session. These are the draft amendments as provided to Center County Office of Planning and Community Development, as well as the Center Region Planning Commission. So the recommended motion, staff has recommended the Board of Supervisors authorize a public hearing on the ordinance amendments for March 15th, 2022.
Thank you, Jenna. Let's entertain the motion that you find in your agenda.
This is Patty, so moved. Do you want me to read it, Laura?
I definitely like to, for clarity's sake. I don't mind. It's in front of me if you.
That's fine. I can read it. This is Patty. I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize the advertisement of a public hearing for March 15th, 2022. Sorry, on an ordinance amending Chapter 16, Parks and Recreation, Chapter 22, Subdivision and Land Development, and Chapter 27, Zoning. Oh, yeah, 27 Zoning.
Thanks, Patty. Do you have a second? Is there a second?
This is Lisa. I'll second.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, discussion on the motion.
I'm not sure if it's worth any merit, but knowing that we're now going to be having a really big discussion ahead of us on March 15th in terms of the strategic plan, is there any value in potentially giving us and the public a little bit more time to process this and potentially postponing this until the April 1st meeting, which is regularly scheduled for that first Tuesday of the month? Just posing this as a question.
Staff, do you want to take that one? Jenna, I think you and I talked about the timing on this a little bit.
Looking at the calendar, I think Ms. Caldwell, you mean the April 5th meeting? That'll be the first Tuesday of the month. The only issue that I have with this is that now the amendments are time sensitive in relation to the terrace streetscape amendments. We have potential land development plans that could be submitted. So it would be my only concern. Outcome of that, you would get a land development similar to the West College student housing development that's previously approved. And if we can get this March 15th, it may still happen. It's just going to depend how fast that applicant can get that plan into us. So.
Yeah, I think we've spent a lot of time on this, discussing it, had a work session on it. I don't think that the time sensitive nature of it kind of trumps the additional input time for me. Does anybody else want to weigh in on the idea of postponing this, which is I think what Hillary was suggesting?
Just asking.
Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and proceed. I only
My hand's raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chair.
I also think if not that what Hillary is proposing, then because of how much stuff is that we have been talking about and how much we will be talking about, especially concerning the strategic plan, I'm wondering if one of these should be moved to our work session, just to put that out there, to eliminate some of that conversation at the next meeting.
At March 15th, we'll be talking about the strategic plan. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of input for the public hearing after all the times that we've talked about it. Lisa?
I was going to say the same. I don't think this will be a big item because there has been so many meetings on this. So I think, yeah, I don't think that we need to plan for extensive discussion on that date. There might be some public input at the public hearing, but I wouldn't think this is long. I think, there's the issues with the timing of the strategic plan and the consultant's contract too. So it just, is unfortunate the timing there, but I wouldn't foresee this being a long one. And then I just had one comment on the ordinance.
Great. Yeah, I also have one comment then on the ordinance says, Bill, you first. Try to keep it to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Not a problem, I don't think, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments, Tiara and Hillary. I've got my Planning Commission hat on at the moment. And one of the risks with regard to delay of approval of the amendments that are before you is the possibility that a plan will be officially submitted by someone. And that plan will then fall under the rules that are in place at the time. So the longer we push some of these things off, the more opportunity a developer or whomever has to come in under the old rules as opposed to some of the modifications that we have suggested in the current draft that you'd be about to approve. And so both for Hillary and Tiara's sake, that's the biggest risk we're dealing with if we put off approval for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and that risk can be pretty substantial depending on what the proposal happens to be that's coming into the township. So I would caution too much more delay on the part of the board to getting these revisions approved if possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Lisa, did you want to comment on the ordinance?
I had one minor thing that isn't a necessary change if it's too substantial. It was just that under section 22 or chapter 22, under off-street parking spaces in the chart, there were I think I'm looking at the right 1.2 spaces per rooming unit for a bed and breakfast. And many meetings ago, we had talked about reducing that to just one, just for clarity and for consistency with the others. But I don't know if that's substantial. So it was just a note.
I guess I'll ask a question. I also, even if it is substantial at this point, I'm ready to move forward. But I do have a question about whether it's substantial, so we know for the future when we're doing pain points part 2, which is already on the horizon. So, so the question is, I'm a little bit unclear. Like, I understand moving to the Saldo, now the board gets to have purview where the zoning hearing board used to, but I still don't quite necessarily understand when it's triggered to come to us so we can make allowances. So like if there's an old house and they just get a permit and they don't have a land development plan and it's just like, here's your permit to have a B&B, except for, oh, you can't because of the parking. Does that still get to come to the board? Because it's not a land development plan, but it's still in the Saldo. How, Jenna, could you comment on how that works?
So looking at B&B specifically, if there is a proposed use change to the structure, if that changing use requires additional parking, that moves you into the land development process.
Great.
For that.
Great.
And for the board to see an issue of this many parking spaces are required. The applicant believes because of the amount of bedrooms that they have, they only want to provide X. That's through the waiver modification process. And those are applications that the board sees. You'll see one March 1st, actually.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay, great. All right. That answered my question. So it's in there. We maybe wanted to change it to 1, but we didn't, but that's okay in terms of it being a barrier, because still, if it makes sense to be 1, we can allow for it to be 1 as a board if a landowner asks.
Yeah. And I think what I remember was supplemental regulations had 1 parking space per bed, and then the Saldo had 1.2 per bed. So depending on where you ended up on that, those were not consistent.
Fun. Great. Okay. All right. Cleared that up. Anything else, Lisa? Okay. Anybody else before I identify my 1 thing? All right, then I'm up. So my 1 thing is in the Park and Rec ordinance revision that was to correspond with the food trucks being able to be permitted in parks. And we had talked about instances where in chapter 16, we'd have to do a little bit revision to make sure that the abilities that we were enabling in chapter 27 or 22 weren't in conflict. So the one place I'm still seeing a conflict, I did mention it to Jenna before the meeting, and she said that the solicitor still feels comfortable with how it's worded, that it is acknowledging we have our own power to give permits along with Center Region Park and Rec, which is what we needed to enable. So in the attachment, it's in the revision to section 2, chapter 16, Parks and Recreation, part 1, section 107. We revised 1B, C, and D. I think that under the C revision to issue permits, it still doesn't indicate that Ferguson Township can issue permits. When I spoke with Jenna, she mentioned that the earlier revision to that chapter was sufficient for the solicitor. So for me, for this revision to move forward, I also am fine with that. However, when I put my other hat on of the Parks Governance Committee hat, I recognize that the need for clarity in our own ordinance is important. And so I'm kind of saying this so we can put a pin in it when we eventually get to chapter 16, which is coming, I don't know, maybe a year down the road or something, that we probably will want to revise C to issue permits to call out the Ferguson Township ability to issue permits, just so it's transparent. So when others look at that, it's really clear that that's a dual authority that we have there. But again, just putting a pin in that, putting a holding spot down, not, according to the solicitor, not something we have to worry about tonight. And that's my only thing that I wanted to make sure we mentioned. So with that, anything else on the item? If not, it's going to be just a regular voice vote. So all in favor of the motion on the table, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. And motion passes unanimously. We're up to new business with the consent agenda. I'll entertain. I'm sorry, would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda? I did want to pull the tree commission work plan, but I'm feeling a little stressed about the time, so I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to follow up with Dave Modricker, which I don't prefer to do because I like it to be transparent, but again, multiple priorities are competing. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Hillary?
Madam
did you
Chair, you
something?
have, I'm sorry, Hillary's hand is raised.
Yeah. Hillary, did you have something?
Yeah, the only thing that I would potentially like to add to the consent agenda is to include a proclamation for Women's History Month on the, now I feel really insecure about knowing my calendar dates. The March 1st regular meeting, just to include that, I'd be happy to have a draft to that for Madam Chair and Centrise to look over and then send to the rest of the board by the end of the week.
Okay, so just let's take just a brief moment just to make sure that everybody's on the same page about consent agenda. So typical consent agenda process, and maybe you're saying this, Hillary, we might be saying the same thing, but I just need to take a pause here to see if we are. So right now, the motion that I'm requesting is a motion to approve the current consent agenda, which doesn't have the item that you talked about on it. And so we typically don't just add them verbally right now. There is a process, sorry, this is going to get deep for a minute. There is a process by which we can add items to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. If we do that, we have to re-advertise with the appropriate agenda at a later time to meet sunshine requirements. So if what you're saying is, and I'm not sure, but if what you're saying is what you wanted to add something to this consent agenda item, which is the motion on the table, we would have had to try to do that ahead of time. And I don't know if I'm comfortable with the process of necessarily adding something to the consent agenda right now, because it makes us have to re-advertise. So
Nope, I must be confused. I had a couple different options proposed to me, and so I will follow up later. Thanks so much.
Okay, sure, no process. Just so, and just quick little synopsis too is just then, so like any board member, because I know I didn't get to say this at orientation, and I don't know how much it was touched on, but any board member, one way that we can get items on the agenda for discussion is to provide a consent agenda item where we do a preliminary write-up of that. And then the deadline to get that in is the week before the meeting prior to the agenda coming out. So like Wednesday or Thursday of the week prior. And then that goes on the consent agenda. We can pull it off there to discuss whether we want to move it forward, or we allow it to just move forward. And then when it moves forward, if it moves forward, it goes on a regular agenda. So just to review that real quick. Okay, so then back to the motion to approve the consent agenda currently in the agenda as is. Anyone care to motion?
This is Patty. I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you much. And all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. All right. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the appointment of interim Ferguson Township manager and secretary. And it will be introduced by none other than Centrise Martin, acting township manager.
Thank you. So provided in the agenda is a narrative that really does describe the appointment of the interim Ferguson Township manager and secretary. As you know, Township Manager David Pravolka submitted his resignation. He is actually on vacation until his last official day on the books. I will serve as acting manager until his last day on the books, at which point, should the board approve the appointment of me to serve as the interim Ferguson Township manager and secretary, that would become effective beginning on March 1st, 2022, which would be in effect until the board appointed a new manager. Happy to answer any questions. There is a recommended motion provided with the agenda.
Thank you. Fantastic. And I'd love to entertain that recommended motion.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors approve the appointment of the Assistant Township Manager, Centrise Martin, as the interim manager effective March 1st, 2022, to serve in accordance with Ferguson Township Home Rule Charter, Article 3, Township Manager, and as interim secretary to fulfill the duties of secretary to the Board of Supervisors until the board appoints a new township manager.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Patty. I'll second.
Oh, it's a three-way tie. I'm calling a three-way tie right there. Okay, so we have a motion, and I don't know. I think maybe Patty actually beat everyone to the draw there, so I'll call it for Patty for our minutes taking. Centuries, thank you so much for your willingness to serve in this capacity. Thank you really very much to guide us through this transition. Any deliberation or discussion, questions, concerns, comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. And of course, motion passes unanimously, and thank you. Next up, a public hearing on a resolution amending the Township of Ferguson Center County, amending the code of the Township of Ferguson Township, Center County, Pennsylvania, adopting an Act 537 sewage facilities plan update. And that'll be introduced by Centuries. Thank you, Centuries.
Yes, provided with the agenda is a copy of the resolution advertised for public hearing to approve for the Board of Supervisors to approve an amendment to the Center Region Act 537 sewage facilities plan. It's my understanding the State College Borough intends to upgrade the sewage collection system by upsizing their linear feet of pipeline in the Atherton area and the linear feet of pipeline in the Calder Way area. In attendance this evening is Corey with CRPA to answer any questions the board might have. I also believe in attendance, we also have the township engineer with the State College Borough. Provided with the agenda is a recommended motion for the board's consideration.
Thank you so much. It looks like this is a public hearing. So first, let's open it up to any public comment on this item. And Patty, your hand is up. Is there?
Sorry, thank you. No, I just had a question about the what was listed in the plan. So the pipes or the sewer lines that you are making larger, and this is just totally a curiosity question. So if a sewer line is going from 8 inches to 12 inches, does that mean that you're going to dig 4 inches deeper, or does it mean that the line will be 4 inches closer to the surface? I know it sounds crazy, but with all these pipes bursting and freezing and stuff, I'm just curious.
I'm actually going to pass that one on to Mike Brown. He's the engineer on the project. He could probably answer it a little better than I could.
Nice.
Yeah, so quite honestly, the answer is it's resolved during design, but it will be buried below the frost line to avoid any freeze issues. Essentially, again, it's making the pipe bigger. In all likelihood, you're probably going to go a little bit lower depending on where it's at, but it really is very relative, minor difference. But again, it will be considered in terms of the frost line to make sure that that's not an issue.
It's an important criteria right there. Yeah, I think I just read something about a 48-inch water main breaking somewhere in Philly. Wow, houses were flooded. That's intense. So we were in a public hearing here. Does anyone in the public want to comment on this before I close the public hearing? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Any further questions for all the folks that have come and stayed at our meeting this long to answer any of our questions about our Act 537 update? Thank you so much. Any other questions? Patty?
I just had one more question. So when you're doing the one little jog that goes around, so how long will it be closed? Like, will that affect Alpha Fire Company, and will they have to reroute?
Andy Arnold, Borough Engineering at the borough. So the sewer line, as part of this Act 537, doesn't go that far down Atherton Street. It's above that towards the north. The majority of the work in the Atherton Street will be done as part of the PennDOT 153 project upcoming. Shouldn't affect Alpha at all.
PennDOT's going to cut down all the trees in everybody's way, right? This is what I've heard anyway. Yeah. Okay, so let's not talk about that too much right now. We got plenty of things else. All right. Any other questions? All right. We have do we have a motion? I don't think we have a motion. Let's get that motion on the table.
The recommended motion is provided with the agenda, I believe, Madam Chair, that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution adopting Act 537 Sewage Facilities Plan Update.
Great. Centrice, you're interim manager, or well, you're acting manager, but you can't make a motion yet.
No, I was pointing it out. I thought maybe it wasn't found.
kidding.
I'm not making the motion at all.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. What board member would like to take responsibility for that motion?
I, Tiara, move.
Tiara?
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, yeah. I, Tiara, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution adopting Act 537 Sewage Facilities Plan Update.
Wonderful. Do we have a second?
A second?
Hillary seconds. All right. Any further discussion? Just a further thank you all for being here and being so patient to answer our few questions. Okay, with that, it's a resolution, so we're gonna have a roll call vote. Centrice, you are up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is roll call resolution number 2022-05. Ms. Denini,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Strickland,
Yes.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Caldwell.
Yes.
All right. Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Next up, we've got, and thank you all. We've got award of contract 2022-C14 street tree planting, introduced by David Modricker, Director of Public Works. Hi, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Danini. On Tuesday, February 1st, we opened bids for contract 2022 C14 street tree planting. This includes planting 77 street trees. We purchased them balled and burlapped, 1.5-inch diameter. They're guaranteed for a year. One bid was received, Greens Landscape Inc., in the amount of $28,879. In my memo, I detail the advertising, some of the other details of the budget. There is adequate funding for the project. I'm recommending the Board of Supervisors award contract 2022 C14 street tree planting in the amount of $28,879 to Greens Landscaping Inc. in accordance with their bid.
All right, that's the motion right there. What board member would like to move that?
This is Patty. I move that motion.
Fantastic. Do we have a second?
This is Lisa. I'll second.
Wonderful. Okay, do we have any questions for Mr. Modricker? Patty. Oh, my Patty, you're on a
Yeah.
streak.
I know. No, I'm sorry. That's why I had this raging headache
Did
today.
not apologize.
Dave, I just have a question for you. And I can't remember actually if it was from this one or the other one, but the ginkgo trees that you bought, are they the ones that don't smell?
They should be fruitless, but if they smell, I don't know.
Because there's like a male one and a female one, and I think it's the male one that might smell really badly, apparently.
Probably.
Yeah, that I would have to look into. I know we typically get the fruitless variety. Even when they're fruitless, it doesn't mean they don't have fruit. It just means they're very small. But I could certainly review that with the arborist and get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Patty. I have heard of that. People don't like that. We already, yeah, okay. We already have the trees though, right?
We don't. We
Okay.
are on purchasing them, and the landscaper Greens will not have acquired them. He might have a hold on the nursery.
Okay.
So if you really do have a serious concern with them, I kind of like to be able to understand it, talk to the arborist and the tree commission, because
Yeah.
the tree commission would be the ones that recommended the ginkgos.
Okay, yeah, no, and they're a great tree. It just, I know that there's one that has a really, really bad smell. And you probably would find that out right away. I just don't know which ones it is.
Great. And so Dave, you can handle that concern internally with staff and the
Yes.
tree. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. That was what I wondered. Okay, super. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, great. That motion passes unanimously, and we are on to discussion on update to Center Region Bike Plan Bicycle Facilities Map and Tables. introduced by Century's Martin.
Thank you. Provided with the agenda is a pretty detailed description of the topic. And I'll just highlight a few of the main items here mentioned. The Council of Governments General Forum adopted the Center Region Bike Plan at its regular meeting in 2015. At that time, there really wasn't a really well-defined process for any amendments. What we're seeing now is the Center Region Bike Plan, because it identifies the gaps in the Center Region bicycle network, it increases the recognition of bicycles that are a form of transportation. It identifies recommendations to make bicycling a more viable transportation option. It's really a very well referenced document within our community. Connectivity has over the years grown to become a more prioritized item for the board. At the time the bike plan was adopted in 2015, there was an established process to perform, to perform bicycle facility updates to the existing plan on a regular basis. So right now, Senior Planner Trish Meek is trying to facilitate a process to get the Center Region Bike Plan updated to reflect the current construction of connectivity, as well as items that are reflective on any official maps that have been updated within the municipalities. It's my understanding that this has gone through several different COG committees, as well as there's been discussion among staff. Jenna Wargo has met with Trish Meek to correspond and ensure that there were a transfer of items. So as Trish is updating this document, it's reflective of Ferguson Township's recent construction of connectivity, as well as what we will see, either have already seen or will see updates to the official map. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I would encourage the board to review the maps and tables that are provided within the agenda. And if there are any specific comments or questions that we would like to forward to Trish Meek, I will take those notes this evening and forward them on behalf of the board by February 17th.
Thank you, Centrise. Lisa, I'm going to kick it over to you for a second first here. See if there's anything you want to add. This came out COG committee that you serve on. Is there anything you wanted to add to that before we get into comments?
Thank you. That was a great introduction. That's exactly what is needed. Just comment on current conditions. I just wanted to add that the Lucy Committee and CRPA will be looking at updating the entire bike plan, a large update for 2023. So that you don't need to think about, where should we add things? This is just a reflection on current conditions. And just a side note, that large overhaul of the plan is, we've recommended that to be an active transportation plan, so a non-motorized transit plan. So that would incorporate pedestrian paths as well. So that's really exciting and a big step forward. So that's something we can look forward to.
Thank you so much. Patty.
Thanks. So when we designate it as such, they are then maintained in the winter?
That is a separate conversation. Dave Modricker, do you want to talk about that at all? Since I see you're still here, or maybe you're not, I don't know, you're not on camera. I do know, I can say for sure that is a separate thing. Just because it's on the map doesn't mean it's winter maintained. Dave Modricker, I see you've reappeared. Do you want to add anything to that?
Winter maintenance, is that the issue?
Yeah, just like, what's the relationship between this update and winter maintenance, if there is any?
I don't know that there's a direct connection. Yeah, we do have paths that we maintain. We have those on our snowplow route map. They get added at the direction of the manager or the board of supervisors. So there's not a direct link with the two.
And is there, Patty, that's a really interesting question. So if I used this network extensively, especially for commuting, I'd be really interested in where can I find that information at a regional level on what paths are maintained through the winter. Do we coordinate with the region, each municipality coordinate with the region to make a winter bike path accessibility map? Or is that an overlay? Or would that be a valid comment, not on this, but like in a, hey, let's comment on the future plan that's coming down the road to incorporate that idea, maybe.
It could certainly be done. I don't think that information is all in one spot right now.
Okay, thanks.
Is
Lisa,
that
you
a
had-
Tracer thing, maybe?
Tracer, I'm ready for that, yeah.
It could be, it would definitely be a GIS thing. And Tracer, you know, is GIS heavy. So it could be.
Okay.
Lisa.
There's a pretty detailed map on the COG site for the bike plan. So I think they might have a winter maintenance over or layer on that. And the online link I know has been updated a lot to reflect changes that have happened over time too. So that's been pretty well maintained, but that might be up there. And I can certainly bring it up if it's not.
Thanks, Lisa. Dave.
So Trish Meek did just ding me recently to ask which paths we maintain. So maybe she took that information that I gave her and now it's a layer. Maybe she collected it from everybody. So you might be you're probably ahead of me on that one.
Thanks. I think it is. I mean, I'd be certainly willing to support that. I know our comments are supposed to be for this, but you know, in terms of Lisa, what you can convey, I think that would be a worthy comment. Like, we are interested in regional coordination of that amenity. The winter maintenance map kind of thing. All right, let's go to then any comments that we as a board want staff to convey. I don't think we hit the motion yet, but that's what it's about. It's about our comments that we want to convey on this particular document. Any comments? Any board members? I don't know if I have a comment. I'm having Lisa, I'll go to you and then I want to ask you and maybe Centrise a question about this map. I'm a little confused. Lisa.
Sure. I just had 3 items I wanted to make a note of. One is on Whitehall Road. It looks like there's a blue line which is designating a bike lane. And I think that there is just a widening of the lane. So if we can just confirm what that is, and that's between 26 and probably Blue Course.
Like, it looks like it ends right before Blue Course, like, oh, well, maybe, yeah, I know where I see what you're talking about. Is that, what do they have that marked as? A bike lane. Is that a bike lane, Dave Modricker or Centrise?
We're talking about the proposed bike path or lane on 26?
No. On Whitehall, Lisa's talking about, it looks like it goes from the corner of 26 and Whitehall toward Whitehall Road Regional Park, but doesn't actually join up with the shared use path that's noted there at Whitehall. It's
yeah, so
like
on
Whitehall.
Yeah, on Whitehall Road, going east from Route 26.
Yes.
When the state widened that road, at our request, they did put wide shoulder / bike lanes in there. I mean, they're not labeled as bike lanes, but they're built to bike lane standards on lane. Was that
Lisa and Dave, I want to try to, so if it's an actual bike lane, I think that our direction is probably going to be, can we paint it as such? I don't know. I'm jumping ahead there a little bit. But my recollection from that Whitehall expansion was there wasn't enough room to make an official bike lane. So it was just a widening of the road. Now that memory could be wrong or fuzzy, but is it appropriate for them to have that marked as a bike lane and there be an expectation for us to make bike lane markers there, or is that not appropriate?
I think that could be asked, and if it does meet the standard and you wanted it marked, then the question they might ask is who's going to maintain the legends. but if we were asked to do that, certainly that can be done.
Lisa, does that get to the heart of your question there about that?
It's, my concern is it's designated on this map as a bike lane and it's unmarked right now. So my suggestion would be at this point to change that, because we're just trying to reflect the current conditions. So maybe we change that now, because as you can see on the map, that blue line doesn't carry down the rest of Whitehall. It's just that one little stretch. So unless I'm wrong, that's what I'm asking for. Is that a painted bike lane?
It's not painted.
What I'm hearing is it's not. So
I mean, I've ridden it on my bike. I don't remember it being painted.
I can't recall either, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's painted.
Right. So I don't think it would be appropriate to have it marked as such on here. So that would be my comment.
Well, I would support that comment, except for I'm not sure that what the criteria is for them to put it on there. So I think the criteria for bike lane has nothing to do with the painting, but it's more about the space, the dimensions. And then the painting is like an accoutrement, like it's an extra. It's like an addition, beneficial, but not required. So can we make a comment that is teasing that out, that says, is this an official bike lane according to what? And if it is, we can consider painting it. And if it's not, then we should remove it from the map.
Yeah, that'd be a fair comment, because, and I'm not sure of the dimensions of the road where it's marked in blue, as opposed to further west where we have the wide shoulder, but an unmarked bike lane. Is it wider up there in that area that's marked blue?
Yeah, that's our comment, I think. I think we don't have enough knowledge to make a specific comment, but it's an either or. If it fits the criteria, leave it on and tell us we might want to paint it. If it doesn't, let's take it off.
If it helps, I can tell you, and you know this, that, the state designates bike lanes. I think we have a G designation going through the township on 45, and it's not painted. So I don't know that.
That's a bike route, though. That's a
bike route. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is a lane. And so we don't have I don't have the regulatory framework to know. Yeah.
Which,
okay.
Dave, I think is an excellent point to make, and one that will be raised when we do the large update, is that there has to be a lot of context around these routes, so that a parent doesn't send their kid on Pennsylvania Bike Route G to get to school, because they'll be on a 50-mile-an-hour road with not a wide shoulder. In fact, a bridge that they have to cross over. So, which is quite narrow. So I think that's just a really good point. I think we have to raise those things, because it's not, there's no context around what some of these things are if you're not familiar. So so something that will be raised as we update it fully. But
so
thanks, that answers my question. I think that's a fair comment to put in about that.
Awesome, great. And you had two other items, I think. Should I?
Well, yeah, but I think I am, I wanted to know if that sports road designation is fair, where we have that shared use path, but I think it's looking fine to me as I look at it now. There hasn't been anything else added. And then the other thing was the Musser Gap trail connection, if that should be on there in some way, if it's on our official map. And I'm
that
not
was
sure
going to be my question. So we'll tag team on that question. So I'm looking here. So back to your other one. It looks like the sports road thing. Okay, so I want to try to be clear about this. Is being addressed, but not on sports road. They have the connection that crosses the private road that we have an easement for, that leads to the school. That is on there as a shared use path, and it is appropriate. but I don't know. I didn't cross-reference to see if that's an addition or if that was already existing. That was my question. I don't understand. Oh, I see. That is not an addition because it doesn't have a code of letter F8B. F8B, let's see, F8B, Nixon Lane from Chester to Pine. Okay, so I would like to comment. Okay, I do not see that they have added the Sports Road link, and I would like staff's input as to whether we can comment to add that. But I'm not sure where that, go ahead, Lisa, stands.
I was just going to say there's a shared use path on the school property there that runs along Sports Road. So I think what my comment would be is, are we allowed to designate that shared use path? Because our path ends at, and maybe Dave Modricker knows this, our path ends at the school property. And then we say, well, you can just hop on that, little tiny bit of the shared use path on the school property. So is that acceptable to have on there? Because right now you dead end at the school.
So your question is, can we put the shared use path on through the school property? My question is, can we put the shared use path on at Sports Road that we previously discussed? And Dave Modricker, do you have any input for either of those questions?
I can help you I can tell you what's existing. I probably shouldn't tell you what should be on the map, but the path that was developed with the Levi subdivision upon further review does extend across Sports Alley. So it does butt up against the school property. So that is an existing link, and what you want to put on the map or how you depict that, I guess, would be your purview.
Can we comment, Lisa? What if we comment as a question? Again, it's not really something we're trying to make them do, but it's a question we have. So our question would be, we as a board want those connections to be made. Can we display them appropriately on the bike map? And then they would have to then ask the school district, right? They have to ask the school district, and then they have to coordinate with our staff to talk about the Sports Road thing amongst themselves and all of that. And then come back to us and say, yes, we could, or no, we couldn't. Because as a board, we want them on there if they can be, is the question.
Yeah,
okay.
Because I think that makes sense. It makes the connection to the road from the school, because what Dave's saying is we can now get on that shared use path and cross Sports Road. We have that easement, so we can get to the path at the school. So can we mark that as that little connector? It's very small, but it is, that last little link right there.
Yep. So Centrise, did you understand that comment? It's a two-part about that one area, and it's, can we, if appropriate, can we add the continuation of the shared use path through the State College Area School District property if they allow us? And should we add the Sports Road path that we are talking about putting on our official map and haven't got there yet, but we really want it on this right here, change to the bike path? So those two, okay, wonderful. Okay. Do any board members have a problem with that comment that I just detailed? Okay, great. Lisa, back to you.
I just wanted to make a comment about, if you are familiar with this area, it seems so small, this little spot we're talking about, but having these things on the bike plan and the official map really can be important when there's development, or say PennDOT comes through, and that is 45 right there. That's Route 45 that this path would almost be at. So PennDOT will look at those things. They'll look at our sidewalk plans, our bike paths and things, and say, okay, where can we make, help you make connections when they come in? And we can say, hey, we have this on our bike plan. So it's just, that's why I would make, normally you wouldn't make such a big deal over a tiny little connection, but it's, it can make a difference at some point, having these things all official.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. Bill, I see your hand up. I promise I'm going to get to you. I am going to just follow up on Lisa's last comment, which was my comment. I am confused by, now I know what my comment is. So in previous bike path maps that I have looked at, there was a missing link between the shared use path at Whitehall Road Regional Park and the shared use path that leads to Musser Gap. There was a missing link in there. On this map, it looks like that missing link has been filled in, but there's no corresponding like little letter code, and it's not in the list of changes to the bike path map. So I'd like us to comment or do another question comment to just confirm that that is being added to the bike path map, even though there's no little code there that indicates that that's a new amenity. If I didn't have prior knowledge, I wouldn't know that that wasn't an existing facility, but it wasn't on the last iteration of the map. So, which is what started this whole discussion at the region. So I'd like to include that as a comment as well. It's another question follow-up. And that's the only thing. Bill, to you for any comments.
Just a quick comment to all of you as you're reviewing these maps, especially in the western end of the township. One of the questions that you have to ask with whomever you're having the conversation as to whether a particular path is a bike path or a shared use path is the question in terms of designation of a farm as it goes by, whether it is or is not preserved. One of the reasons we don't have bike paths on Whitehall Road from the intersection of 26 all the way out where all that widening was done is because the regulations with regard to preserved farms doesn't allow a taking of farmland for the purpose of bike paths. And going back to your question, when you have a question or discussion with the center region regarding the Whitehall Road going in towards the borough, if you're talking about that stretch of land that borders the Homan Farm is a preserved farm. And so the designation of that stretch probably should be shared use and not bike path, even though the state is the one who did the widening of the road. I don't know the answer to that, but it would seem to me that one of the reasons why it might be designated as a shared use path is because of the Homan preservation, the Homan Farm preservation issue. So when you have those questions and you're looking at connectivity for bike paths in the western end of the township, one of the questions you have to ask is, where are the preserved farms in relation to this, and whether you can designate them as bike paths or shared use paths, because that difference is important. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. Thanks for being here and sharing that. All right, we have discussed and have come up with 3 comments. There is a motion in the agenda that will provide the action by which we forward them. I'd like to entertain that motion, please.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors direct the acting township manager to forward its comments on the draft 2022 Center Region bike plan maps and tables to the senior planner with the Center Region Planning Agency no later than February 17th, 2022.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Tierra Williams, second that.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed, same sign. And motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item is the board member request, proclamation of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, to officially recognize Black History Month of 2022. That'll be introduced by Ms. Tierra Williams, Township Supervisor. Tierra.
Hi, do you want me to read the narrative or do you want me to read the actual proclamation? I wasn't sure. I know last time you read the
Yeah.
actual proclamation. So
Yeah, that's 100% up to you. If you would like to read the proclamation and are so moved, please do. I also would be happy to read it if you prefer not. You don't necessarily have to read the narrative. You're also welcome to do that. It's pretty much up to you. If you just want to highlight certain parts or just talk a little bit about it personally, that's also great. So welcome to your first item to present, Tiara. So
thanks. So as you said, a proclamation of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, to officially recognize Black History Month. Some of the highlights in the proclamation, of course, recognize that this was originally Negro History Week in 1926, created by Carter G. Woodson, and President Gerald Ford officially recognized it as Black History Month in 1976, and therefore it's been that way since. This year, 2022, the theme is Black Health and Wellness. So I think that's a good thing. We should all be healthy out here, especially when we're talking about COVID-19 and the effects that they've had on the African-American community. Ferguson Township acknowledges the Board of Supervisors is more diverse and members on the board are directly affected by the Black Lives Matter movement. And Ferguson Township is committed to making this an inclusive and welcoming environment for all citizens and embraces the celebration of diverse families, identities, and pride, builds understanding, deepens empathy, and strengthens the fiber of our community. And today, Black Americans lead movements for change and serve our community at every level. So now, therefore, the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim the month of February 2022 as Black History Month and acknowledge the national theme, Black Health and Wellness. We call upon public officials, educators, and residents of our township to observe the month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities, and recognize the tremendous contributions of the Black and African Americans to our community. Proclaimed on this day, the 15th day of February, 2022. Yes.
fantastic. Thank you so much. We do have a motion in the agenda that we can entertain and then have any discussion. Would anyone like to move that motion?
I recommend that we move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the proclamation of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, to officially recognize Black History Month of 2022, specifically stating Black mental health and wellness.
Thank you. And do we have a second? I'm sorry, was that Patty?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, any discussion, comments? I'll say thank you so much for bringing this to the table, and I look forward to our work here together and flexing the consent agenda to get more of these kinds of things on our agenda to acknowledge important parts of our community and important celebrations and acknowledgements. So I'll just say thank you for taking the time to write that lovely proclamation and to bring it to our table. So thank you much. Anything else?
I think the only other thing is that I did ask to be added as a signature, which the chair did say she had no issue with. I don't know if the board needs to vote on that though.
Great point. Thank you much. I did confirm with the interim manager that we don't have to take a formal vote, just acknowledging here that there'll be an additional signatory on the proclamation. We'll do it. So we'll go ahead and move forward with that. So, all right. If there is nothing else, we will go ahead and vote. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. And motion passes unanimously. All right, with that, we have come to just about the end of our agenda. We've got communications to the board. Is there anything anyone would care to share that hasn't been shared already? Okay, I am seeing none. We've got our calendar items. We've got our regular meetings. They're found on our website on our calendar, and that's all we've got stacked in there for this evening. And next up is we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, thank you. And thank you all and have a good night. Thanks.